Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Naruto awakens the Rinnegan at the Valley of the End. Before I start, please support for more amazing content and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by Darkus Cyril and link in the description and support writer. Let's start the video. Chapter 1 Naruto was growling as he stood under the enormous statue of the first Hokage, Hashirama Senju. He faced the other side of the Valley of the End at a person who stood under the equally enormous statue of the greatest of the Uchiha clan, Madara Uchiha. The person under this statue was none other than Sasuke Uchiha, Naruto's best friend, but Sasuke wasn't the same as Naruto remembered. He was twisted by the power given to him by Orochimaru, the snake Sannin of the Leaf Village, Konoha. Sasuke laughed darkly as he gazed upon his once best friend. Naruto was in his same kill-me orange jumpsuit, his blonde hair spiked in every direction, his blue eyes glaring back at Sasuke, and his three whisker marks more defined and feral, along with his canines, than they usually are. Sasuke was surprised when Naruto had unleashed this strange power that took the form of an aura around Naruto with a single tail. Sasuke laughed some more as the curse mark spread over his entire body, turning his skin dark and making a black shuriken-like mark across his nose, and his eyes turned black, causing his now fully matured Sharingan to stand out much more. Suddenly the back of Sasuke's blue shirt with the Uchiha symbol on the back stretched and tore, revealing two hand-like wings. He kneeled a bit as he adjusted to the weight of the wings, dirtying his white baggy shorts in the process. A few seconds after he stood up and charged a Chidori in his right hand, which became tainted by the curse mark, forming a dark Chidori. Meanwhile, Naruto had formed a tailed Rasengan, AN. This is just what I call the Rasengan Naruto forms when he's in the one-tailed state, and the two leaped outwards towards each other. They shouted each other's names, Sasuke, Naruto. As the two attacks collided, Naruto felt an immense pain, but not where Sasuke was striking, but rather in his eyes. Soon after, Sasuke and Naruto were enveloped in a huge black sphere that blocked the waterfall between the statues of Hashirama and Madara. The sphere dissolved and exploded, sending the two flying towards the bottom of the valley. When all of the dust and mist had cleared, Sasuke was standing, in the rain, over a beaten Naruto, who had a hole in his stomach from where Sasuke had stabbed him with his dark Chidori, though luckily he missed any vital organs and missed his spine completely. Sasuke then fell to his knees and leaned over Naruto with his hands holding him up as he gazed upon Naruto's face in a daze. Suddenly Naruto's eyes shot open for a few seconds as he struggled to stay conscious, but he fell back into unconsciousness, and Sasuke gasped before falling down beside Naruto. Just before Sasuke lost consciousness, his last thoughts before he passed out were, "What was that?" A few moments later Kakashi Haddock arrived and examined the two before sighing in relief, picking both of them up and carrying them back to Konoha. When Kakashi arrived, the fifth Hokage, Tsunade Senju, came up and inspected both Leaf Genin before placing them in the hospital. However, she was disturbed by what she saw with Naruto, but decided to mention it later, after he recovered from the intensive surgery he would need. Chapter 2 Kakashi walked into Naruto's room. It was the day after his surgery was finally finished and he was finally allowed visitors. However, Naruto had yet to regain consciousness, and it worried Kakashi and all of Naruto's friends, except Sakura. For some reason unknown to the other genin, Sakura had been in a bad mood. Sure, when she found out Sasuke had been brought back she was so excited, but when she visited him in the hospital, she came out of his room looking grim. Sakura's bad mood made everyone wonder what was wrong, but they soon found out that it had to do with Naruto, because whenever he was mentioned, she would narrow her eyes, and her temper would get worse. The others were worried that since she would do something bad to him, since she was obviously upset with him for bringing back Sasuke injured, and sadly they were right. A few days after his surgery, Sakura walked into Naruto's room and stood by his bed glaring at him. Yes, she was happy he brought Sasuke back, but she was furious that he attacked her Sasuke. She pulled out a hidden kunai and held it out over Naruto's unconscious form. Before she could do anything however, Naruto's eyes twitched and slowly opened. Sakura hid the kunai and changed her expression to one of worry, so Naruto wouldn't get suspicious. However, when his eyes opened fully she gasped and stepped back. He looked at Sakura and smiled before noticing her shocked expression, then he spoke weakly, "Hey Sakura, what's wrong?" Sakura didn't or couldn't respond, but managed to stutter out a few words, "And Naruto, why your eyes?" Naruto looked confused. "My eyes? What about my eyes?" It was then that Naruto noticed something he had missed just seconds before. His eyesight had improved drastically. Naruto then looked at Sakura with an even more confused expression. "Why has my eyesight gotten so much better?" Sakura turned and ran from the room, and then out of the corner of his eye, Naruto saw a hand mirror. He picked it up, but before he could look at his reflection the door opened up and Tsunade walked in, and noticing he was awake but facing away from her. "Oh good, you're awake. I just wanted to say that you're going to be alright and will be able to leave in 3 to 4 days." Naruto turned around holding the hand mirror. He hadn't seen his reflection yet, and Shizune, who had walked in after Tsunade, gasped when she saw his eyes. It was then that Naruto was about to hold the mirror up when Tsunade stopped him with a worried expression on her face. "I think you should wait before you do that, it'll be a shock to you once you find out, and I want to wait until you are fully recovered before you find out." Naruto set the mirror down slowly, but asked, "When I find out what?" Tsunade looked down for a second, then looked back at Naruto. "You have a Kikei Genkai." Naruto was stunned and looked at his hands before he looked at Tsunade. "I really have a Kikei Genkai." Tsunade nodded and Naruto looked back at his hands, clenched them and threw one hand up. "Awesome. I have a Kikei Genkai Databao." Tsunade and Shizune laughed, and Naruto looked like he had become Hokage just then. Chapter 3. Disclaimers. I don't own Naruto or anything in the Naruto world, only the single arc which will be introduced in later chapters. Sorry I forgot to add this in the last chapters, but you should know I don't own the anime Naruto in any way, shape or form. If I did, it would take forever for the series to even begin. Awesome. I have a Kikei Genkai Databao. Naruto exclaimed, making Tsunade and Shizune laugh at his antics. Jiraiya, on a giant toad, landed outside Naruto's window just as Naruto shouted this. He was surprised thinking it was something like the spirit chains used by Kushina, but then when Naruto turned to look at him, he gasped and jumped into the room and looked at Naruto's eyes in shock. Naruto looked at him confused. "What's wrong, Yoro-senin?" Jiraiya face faulted and shouted at him, "Come on, will you stop calling me that?" Naruto however turned away after saying that and just looked at him with an innocent expression. You say something." Jiraiya face faulted again, and Tsunade and Shizune sweat dropped while Naruto laughed in his head. Gotta thank Kakashi-sensei for that one. Jiraiya stood up and looked at Naruto carefully and examined his eyes, while Naruto noticed his serious expression and immediately looked confused as Jiraiya looked astounded at his eyes. Naruto tilted his head. "What's wrong, Yoro-senin?" Jiraiya looked at Tsunade who nodded, and Jiraiya took a deep breath. "Naruto, you have a Dijutsu, a very rare one that I've only seen once in my entire life." Naruto's eyes widened, and he smiled. "Cool, what is it?" "It's a legendary Dijutsu that puts the Sharingan and Byakugan to shame." Naruto's eyes widened. "It's called the Rinnegan." Naruto looked confused. "What is that?" "I've never heard of the Rinnegan before." Jiraiya nodded. "I'm not surprised, I saw it once, and even then I had a hard time believing it. It's a Dijutsu possessed by the creator of modern ninjutsu. I take it you've heard the legend of the Sage of the Six Realms, right?" Naruto nodded, who hadn't heard of that legend, though most considered it a myth or a fairy tale, rather than believe it. Jiraiya saw that he was even more confused than before and sighed again. The Sage of the Six Realms, or the Rakuto Sennin as he was also known as, was rumored to possess the Rinnegan. Naruto's eyes widened in amazement. "Awesome, I have a Dijutsu that amazing." Naruto grabbed the hand mirror again and looked at his reflection, or more specifically his eyes. They were a pale purple in color with multiple rings surrounding a tiny dot-like pupil. Naruto looked at Jiraiya and smiled again. "It looks awesome. So what does it do? Do you know? Tell me please." Jiraiya laughed at how excited he sounded and held his hands out in a calm down motion. "All I know for a fact is that you have extraordinary eyesight and can use any jutsu of any affinity. Other than that I don't know the extent of its power. Now why don't you try deactivating it? Just focus and remove the chakra from your eyes." Naruto nodded and focused. He felt the chakra behind his eyes, but when he tried removing the chakra, he found that it hurt his eyes and that the chakra wouldn't budge at all. He opened his eyes and looked at Jiraiya who had a confused expression. "Hey Gaki, why didn't you deactivate it?" Naruto shook his head. "I couldn't, for some reason when I try my eyes hurt, and even if I tried the chakra wouldn't budge at all." Jiraiya nodded, a thoughtful expression on his face, and he muttered out loud, just like Nagato, my former student, he couldn't deactivate it either. It's a shame he died. He would have been able to help you master it, since he mastered it himself." An Anbu appeared behind Tsunade and whispered something to her that Naruto couldn't hear, not that he was paying attention anyways since he had closed his eyes as he began to think. Tsunade nodded and walked out of the room, and the Anbu disappeared. While leaving, she said, "Sasuke has woken up again. I'm going to go check on him and make sure he doesn't try anything." Naruto opened his eyes and nodded at her, then he looked at Jiraiya. "So, what did you come here for?" "I don't think it was to see my eyes." Jiraiya nodded and went over and sat on the windowsill. "I want you to come with me on a training trip. We'll be gone for 3 years, but I guarantee that when we return you'll be stronger than you are now." Naruto's eyes widened, and he smiled. "Awesome, when do we leave?" Jiraiya smiled and told him that they would leave in a week. 1 week later, Naruto and Jiraiya stood under the front gates of Konoha with Tsunade and Shizune. "Be sure to take care of yourself, brat, and come back a stronger ninja." Naruto nodded at Tsunade and, lifting his new sunglasses up, The sunglasses look like those sunglasses things that Renji wore when he first appeared in Bleach with Byakuya searching for Rukia, smiled. "You got it." Granny Tsunade had a tick mark on her forehead at that, but didn't say anything and just smiled. Shizune walked up to Naruto and smiled brightly. "I hope you have a good trip." Naruto smiled at Shizune as well and nodded. "Just watch, I'll get stronger, and I'll be taking Granny Tsunade's Hokage hat in no time." Shizune giggled at him and nodded. Jiraiya and Naruto left while waving to the two standing under the gate and turned around, ready for what the world had to throw at them. End of ch. 3. Chapter 4. Disclaimers. I don't own the anime Naruto in any way, shape, or form. One day after leaving Konoha, Naruto looked around through his sunglasses as he and Jiraiya walked down a deserted road. Jiraiya was looking at a small map he had of the general area and was plotting where they would head to first. Naruto looked at Jiraiya and spoke up, "Hey Iro-sennin, where are we going and what are you going to teach me on this trip?" Jiraiya looked up from his map, "Well, we're going to roam around the land of fire, and then after that we'll probably head to the land of lightning. Why are we going there, Iro-sennin?" Naruto asked, confused. "Because of Kumo, they have someone like you, a Jinchuriki, but he is close to mastering his tailed beasts." Naruto's eyes widened, someone else has a tailed beast sealed in them. And they are close to completely controlling it. Awesome, I have got to learn from this person. Naruto sounded extremely excited as he said this as Jiraiya laughed. "Now as for what I'm going to teach you, well, we'll start on letting you learn how to harness and control the 9 tails chakra better, so your training will be easier with the 8 tails Jinchuriki." Naruto nodded and began to think as Jiraiya continued, "We'll also help you make your own variation of the Rasengan and teach you ninjutsu, however, since you aren't a Jinjutsu type we will skip that off." "I wanted to learn Jinjutsu," Naruto said with a pout. Jiraiya laughed, "Sorry kid, you just aren't the right kind of shinobi. There are several shinobi types. You happen to be the assault type, not the Jinjutsu type." Naruto nodded, still pouting a little bit, before Jiraiya continued, "However, I can teach you to detect and dispel a Jinjutsu." Naruto nodded, at least he could learn that much about Jinjutsu. Naruto looked at the upcoming town and started walking faster, anxious to begin his training. Jiraiya smiled as he figured that the upcoming town, due to it being large but mostly empty, would be the perfect place to train Naruto to harness the 9 tails chakra. 3 weeks later, Naruto woke up near a destroyed building and looked around. He saw Jiraiya sitting against a wall with a large gash across his chest. Naruto looked shocked. "Hey Iro-sennin, what happened? Why are you hurt?" Jiraiya looked like he was having difficulty breathing and managed to say, You mean you don't remember?" Naruto shook his head looking worried for his perverted sensei. Jiraiya sighed and fell over unconscious. Naruto stood up with difficulty and made his way over to Jiraiya. He kneeled and with some difficulty managed to get the perverted sage onto his back. "Man Iro-sennin, you're heavy, what do you do while I'm on my own? Go to an all-you-can-eat buffet?" Naruto walked slowly to the hospital, noticing people looking at the sage on his back in respect. Naruto didn't know it, but Jiraiya had fought him while he had unknowingly gone out of control when he reached the 4th tail in his fox cloak. Jiraiya had fought hard and would have suppressed the 9 tails, but then the 4-tailed state Naruto had used the ultimate tailed beast attack, the tailed beast ball. This attack destroyed a good portion of the abandoned part of the town and gave Jiraiya the gash across his chest. Naruto looked up and saw they were close to the hospital. Naruto dragged his feet as he walked slowly onwards towards the hospital before he collapsed a few feet from the front door. Luckily a few of the locals decided to help. They picked up Naruto and 2 more picked up Jiraiya and carried them into the hospital where a nurse was alerted and they were sent into separate rooms. Jiraiya had been sent to get his gash checked out and Naruto was having his skin regrown since it had peeled off when he lost control and he was healing slower than usual since the chakra from the fox cloak had injured him so much. Seal. Naruto's opened his eyes and looked around. It was dark and the area looked familiar, but he noticed it wasn't the hospital. He was in a sewer-like place and he groaned and turned seeing the cage. "What am I doing here, furball?" When he received no answer he walked up near the enormous cage door, which had a single slip of paper with the kanji for seal written on it. Naruto looked in the depths but could not see the familiar silhouette of the 9-tailed fox. However he heard a sound inside the seal, it was the sound of heavy breathing, and he saw a woman walk out of the shadows towards him. When he saw the woman clearly he gasped at her appearance. She was roughly 6 feet tall, her hair was crimson red with gold streaks through it that reached her legs. Her face had a soft glow to it that her hair framed with 2 long bangs that complemented her crimson red eyes with slit pupils. She had on a crimson battle kimono with gold edging. She had a perfect Hercules figure and B-cup BREASTAN. I decided to go with something different than the usual D-cups since that is always what they are in any fan fiction. It's nice to change things up a bit people, so don't stick with one thing that, while not very large, still complemented her figure nicely. Naruto's eyes widened at her beauty and wondered who she was, but then he noticed that on top of her head were 2 red fox ears with gold tips and behind her were 9 beautiful tails with gold tips as well. It was then that Naruto knew who it was. What the hell, Kyuubi? What's with that form? Kyuubi looked confused before examining her form and looked at him with her head tilted cutely. "What do you mean? This is my human form, did you prefer my true form over this?" Naruto was now thrown for a loop. "What's going on here? Last time I was here you thought of me as nothing more than a bug that you wanted to squash, and now you're acting all innocent. I mean, what's up with that?" Kyuubi looked at him and looked down. "That was before I looked into your memory," she said distantly. Naruto looked confused, what do you mean? Kyuubi sighed and looked at him sadly, in the realm of demons, we are actually more civilized than you humans believe, and we have one rule that is enforced above all others, and that rule is to never harm a child. Naruto's eyes widened in surprise at that rule, and Kyuubi continued, when I saw your memories for the first time, I was shocked that you had remained sane throughout all those years of torment and suffering. I came to admire you, since you were strong enough to overcome their hatred for you and stay pure as you are now. Naruto looked slightly embarrassed at her words as she looked at him like she was his biggest fan. Naruto then asked, why do you look at me like that? Kyuubi giggled and smiled at him, because I admire your strength, you are no doubt worthy of being my container, possibly better than my former containers. Naruto looked confused, but began to feel a distant pull. Looks like you're waking up, listen, I'll keep a telepathic communication with you, so if you have any questions ask me, okay? Naruto nodded and faded away from the seal. Outside of the seal in the hospital, Naruto opened his eyes as a nurse was examining his regrown skin, making sure everything was healed properly. She noticed Naruto waking up and smiled, good afternoon, may I ask how you are feeling? Naruto groaned and shifted around a bit and spoke, well I'm a bit sore, but I'm fine. The nurse nodded before making some notes on the clipboard she held. She left saying, we'll be able to let you out in the morning, so rest until then. Naruto nodded and laid down thinking, it's strange that Kyuubi is suddenly so nice, I hope this isn't a plot by her to take me over. While Naruto was thinking, Kyuubi was pacing in her cage thinking to herself, I wonder if I'll be able to gain his trust, I do admire him for his strength, but I sense he doesn't trust me, maybe I'll show him that he can trust me. Yes, I'll do that. In fact, I think I know just how to do that. Kyuubi began to pace, muttering to herself. Chapter 5. Disclaimers. I don't own the world of Naruto. Naruto sat up in his bed and noticed his sunglasses sitting on the bedside table. He put them on and called back the nurse who had treated him and asked her not to tell anyone of his eyes, since he wanted it kept a secret. Of course the nurse said, smiling, and Naruto nodded, smiling back, making her blush a bit, but Naruto didn't notice because he looked around his room. Hey, where's the old man who was with me? The nurse looked confused before remembering Jiraiya. Oh, he's in another room, but for some reason the nurses stay away from him, except the nurse assigned to him, except that she has to take care of him, even though she says he creeps her out. Naruto chuckles while sweat dropping. That's the Iro-senin, alright, he thought. At the same time in Jiraiya's room, Jiraiya stared at the nurse standing by the door while giggling, come on, I won't hurt you. You should know, I'm famous, so why don't you come on over here and take care of little old me? Haha. The nurse looked scared, but now looked terrified at what he was implying and backed up wanting to leave, but knowing that the doctor would scold her if she didn't take care of the patient. Suddenly, while Jiraiya was giggling perversely, a bright light shined in his room and a large scroll the size of Jiraiya's summoning contract appeared and flew at him, slamming into his chest like it was shot out of a cannon. Jiraiya felt agonizing pain and fell unconscious. The nurse took a tiny step forward and noticed he was out cold. She then did her duties as a nurse and healed his injuries and left before he could wake up, but she went back into the room and took the scroll off of his chest and put it beside his bed as he snoozed away. Back in Naruto's room, present time, Naruto's nurse left after examining him once more, saying he could leave, and he went to Jiraiya's room and almost ran into the nurse who was just leaving his room. Naruto rubbed the back of his head sheepishly before saying, sorry about the Iro-senin, he can't really control himself. The nurse nodded looking back nervously at Jiraiya's room and walked away as quickly as she could without running. Naruto's sweat dropped again because he knew Jiraiya freaked her out. Naruto turned around and opened the door to see Jiraiya sleeping. Naruto walked over and shook his head sighing, Iro-senin, you are totally pathetic, unfortunately you are also my sensei. Jiraiya woke up as soon as Naruto stopped talking and rubbed his chest like it was sore. Ugh, what hit me? I feel like I got punched by Tsunade when I peeked in on her while she was in the hot springs. Naruto shook his head, maybe that nurse you scared half to death. Iro-senin. Jiraiya looked at Naruto and sighed, then sat up in an instant looking around the room, no, it wasn't that cute nurse. Naruto's sweat dropped again and sighed as Jiraiya continued, no, there was a bright light and then I thought I saw a scroll fly at me. Naruto tilted his head, confused by what he was saying, huh? You mean that scroll there? Naruto pointed at the scroll that the nurse had set down on the bedside table. Jiraiya looked shocked and grabbed it, but found that, for some reason, he couldn't open it and sighed, oh well, I guess we won't see what's inside. Naruto took off his sunglasses and looked at the scroll carefully, like he saw something Jiraiya couldn't. Hey Iro-senin, what's that seal right there? Naruto pointed where the seal was but Jiraiya couldn't see it and looked at Naruto confused. What seal? There's nothing there. Naruto sighed, why couldn't Jiraiya see it when it was there plain as day? Naruto touched the seal meaning to show him where it was, but then the seal began to glow, revealing itself to both Naruto and Jiraiya, as the latter looked shocked that Naruto had seen a hidden seal, and then on the scroll appeared the kanji that read scroll of the Rinnegan. Jiraiya looked at Naruto who looked just as confused and back at the scroll before he opened it. When he did, he gasped at its content, and Naruto looked over to see what the scroll contained and saw a detailed description of his Rinnegan. Naruto looked at Jiraiya, who looked back at him, and they began to read the scroll, which read as: "The Rinnegan is the Kage Genkai of Rakuto Sennin, sage of the Six Realms, and his descendants." Rakuto Sennin was viewed as the original shinobi, and his Dojutsu was regarded as the most venerable of the three great Dojutsu. As the original shinobi, it was said he created modern ninjutsu. The Rinnegan was regarded as a god of creation when the world was racked with chaos, and as a weapon of destruction, which could return everything to nothingness. Usage of the Rinnegan was said to give the user mastery over all 6 forms of chakra nature manipulation. These forms include the following: fire, water, earth, lightning, wind, and gravity. However, it not only gives access to these 6 elements, but also the combination elements such as the following: wood, ice, scorch, boiling, lava, dust, and many other known and unknown combination elements. It also allows the Rinnegan wielder to sign multiple summoning contracts. The wielder of the Rinnegan must go through rigorous training in order to master it. To master it, one must master 6 levels of being. Tendu, the Diva realm, uses the ability to utilize Shinra Tensei and Banshu Tenin, as well as a secret technique known as Shibaku Tensei. These jutsu are capable of moderate gravity manipulation. However, one is able to donate some of his own life force to utilize a large-scale version of this technique, which is capable of causing massive destruction. Chikushaudu, or the animal realm, is able to summon creatures and other individuals. Next is Ninjendu, the human realm, a body which focuses more on jutsu. This realm can also read the minds and remove the soul of enemies it grips. The Gakudu, the hell realm, is capable of utilizing a spectral hell enma capable of judging whether one is telling the truth or not. This figure can also remove the soul of the one it judges and is capable to returning the souls to those killed in battle. Shuridu, or the Asura realm, is able to generate technology and weaponry through its body. Asura is capable of unleashing missiles and laser-like blasts. Finally is Gakudu, the hungry ghost realm, who uses sealing techniques to neutralize most any incoming chakra-based attacks, both natural and elemental. The Rinnegan user is put through enormous strain upon using these 6 paths, but a way exists to use them in a way that is less strainful. It is becoming what is known as an outer path. To do this, one must have mastered the 6 paths. Once that has been accomplished, then one must take the corpses of 6 humans and modify them so that they too will possess the Rinnegan, but modified differently so that each will possess a single path, one for human, one for diva, one for hell, one for hungry ghost, one for animal, and finally, one for Asura. However, the Asura realm body will need to be modified to be entirely mechanical under its human flesh. The Rinnegan also allows one to obtain the ability to summon a powerful force known as Jedu Mazu, the heretical demon statue. This large statue is capable of stealing the souls of those it's used against. After a wielder of the Rinnegan summons the entity, the statue will extend black chakra rods from its body into the summoner's back. This process will weaken the summoner's body, but allow him to utilize the statue's spectral dragons. The statue will open its mouth and emit the form of a dragon, which will remove the soul from the body of anyone it passes through. When the statue is no longer needed and disperses, it breaks the chakra rods connecting itself to its summoner, leaving them pierced in his back. These chakra rods can then be broken down and used as chakra receptor for the outer path to control the 6 corpses that are used as the 6 separate paths. When the chakra rods are used, they will appear as piercings to those who do not know what they are. However, the chakra rods must be placed accordingly in order for the body to have the proper path instilled in it. If one rod is misplaced, it will only have jutsu and nothing else, and the body will not function properly at all, leading it to be disposed of more easily by an enemy. Naruto looked from the scroll to Jiraiya and back wide-eyed. Wow, the Rinnegan is strong. Jiraiya nodded in fascination, his eyes just wide. No kidding Gaki, I knew it gave affinities to the 5 elements, but never to gravity. And even the ability to wield elements like wood, ice, or even dust, and allow the signing of multiple summoning contracts. This is absolutely amazing. Naruto nodded, feeling the same amount of fascination as his perverted teacher. Suddenly Naruto's assigned nurse walked in, looking around. When she saw him, she had an annoyed expression as she crossed her arms and had one foot tapping impatiently. She sighed, obviously aggravated. I said you would be discharged from the hospital in the morning, so get back into your room before you strain any injuries you still have. Naruto flinched and nodded, saying a quick yes ma'am, and he was soon rushing back to his room as the nurse shouted at him, and no running. Chapter 6. Disclaimers. I don't own the anime manga Naruto, nor do I own Avatar: The Last Airbender in any way, shape, or form. A month later, on the way to Kumo, Naruto is walking behind Jiraiya reading the first Icha book ever written. Of course he would never tell Jiraiya that he had come to like the books, he still had his pride after all. When Jiraiya turned around, Naruto had hidden the book and looked bored. So Iro Sennin, where are we going? Jiraiya looked at a map he was holding. Well, we're going to Kumo, so I can meet an informant from my spy organization. Naruto looked up and saw several fire blasts heading towards him and Jiraiya. Naruto pushed Jiraiya and jumped back as the fire blasts hit where they were just moments before, as several ninjas dropped down wearing red, maroon, and black armor, and they took up an unusual taijutsu stance. Naruto took the stance he was taught and prepared to fight, but shouted out to Jiraiya, "Hey Iro-sennin, who are these guys?" One of the ninja took a step forward. "We are warriors of the soon-to-be-formed Fire Nation. AN. If you don't know where this is from, then look up top because that is pathetic if you don't know." Naruto was very confused at what these people were saying, and it showed on his face, making the Rouge ninja sigh, and another spoke out, "Look kid, we're just going to take down the land of fire and turn it into a true land of fire, the Fire Nation as we are going to call it. Burjutsu doesn't exist, rather we rely on our special taijutsu that allows us to harness our fire chakra to create fire." Like so the one who had spoken thrust one fist forward and fire shot from it right at Naruto. Naruto ducked under the fire blast and leaped into a backflip and landing a few feet away, and his hands went into the all-familiar cross-hand sign, Shadow Clone Jutsu. 5 Narutos appeared around the original, and the 6 of them charged at the group as Jiraiya made his presence known, jumping down as he and Naruto. "So you are those Rouge ninja from varying nations, who claim to be what you call firebenders, what's up with all of that? I admit your taijutsu styles are incredible, being able to harness the element of fire, and from what I've heard, even lightning itself without hand signs. But why take over a nation? Why not train this and use this ability to help others?" They all laughed and took up more stances and began to fight while laughing at them. Naruto jumped up and over the Rouge ninjas, and his clones did the same, and they began to fight. One of Naruto's clones was dispelled by a kick to the gut, and soon after another fell victim to a fire blast, and then after a few minutes of fighting, with Jiraiya's help, Naruto and the rest of the clones subdued the group and tied them up to a random tree and left them there. "What was that about, Iro-sennin?" Naruto asked while looking confused. Jiraiya looked at Naruto and sighed. They are a group of Rouge shinobi who had developed a unique taijutsu style that allowed them to harness their fire chakra and according to rumors lightning chakra as well, and are able to use it to aid them in combat. They call it firebending, though it is very unusual. It is very interesting. Naruto nodded, and what Jiraiya didn't realize was that Naruto had memorized their fighting styles but decided to wait until he had learned some fire jutsu before attempting to try it out for himself. A month later, outside the gates of Kumo. It's been almost 4 months since Naruto and Jiraiya had left the Konoha on their training trip, and Jiraiya had begun teaching Naruto some jutsu, but he wanted to see which element Naruto was strongest in, so he tested Naruto. Flashback no jutsu. I am very bored, which is why I did this. Alright Naruto, it is time to see what element you have as your main element. Naruto nodded, and Jiraiya held out a sheet of paper and gave it to him. This is called chakra paper. It is made from a special tree that lives off of chakra. This will tell you what element or elements you have, so try channeling some chakra through it. Naruto nodded and pushed chakra into it. First it began to float, but then it split into 4 equal pieces, and each piece had something different happen. One piece caught flames and turned to ashes. The second piece turned damp and soggy. The third piece crumbled into dust. And the final piece crinkled up. Jiraiya looked and nodded as Naruto spoke up, "So Iro-sennin, which is my main element?" Jiraiya smiled and patted his head. "It seems your strongest element is wind." Naruto smiled, "Awesome databeo." Jiraiya chuckled, "Okay, so here is a scroll with some wind jutsu. I think you like." Jiraiya gave Naruto a scroll with the kanji for wind on it. Flashback no jutsu. Kai. Jiraiya was impressed on how Naruto's training was coming along. So far he knew Fuetin, Tatapa, Fuetin, Atsugai, Fuetin, Juha, Repashu, Fuetin, Juha, Shu, and Fuetin, Rinkuiden. Jiraiya had opted to have him create a variation of the Rasengan, and Naruto had agreed quickly, but they were still deciding on the details of the technique, what it should look like, what to call it, and how powerful it should be. Naruto looked at the gate to Kumo in amazement. When he saw it from far away, it was a beautiful sight, a city built onto the side of a mountain. Now that they were at the gates, Naruto was still impressed. They showed their passports to the guards and told them that they were on a training trip around the nations, which they had information to prove. Jiraiya walked off in one direction, leaving Naruto alone, again. Naruto walked along and he bumped into a woman a few years older than him with blonde hair. They both said sorry at the same time and walked their separate ways. Naruto walked around and almost walked into a man with black glasses, the kanji for iron on his shoulder, and bull horns facing one direction on his cheek. He was wearing the average Kumo Jonin attire with a long scarf that was white outside and red inside. He also had 7 swords on his back. Naruto looked sheepishly at him. "Sorry, wasn't paying much attention to where I was going." The man smirked. "Don't bother with it, otherwise you might pitch a fit." The man said, "Don't expect to hear much rapping from B since I suck at copying the way he talks," causing Naruto to sweat drop. "Okay, so what's your name?" The man nodded and spoke again, "Yo, I'm Killer B, I'm the famous container of Hachibi, yay." He held out his fist towards Naruto, who looked surprised and fist bumped Killer B. Awesome, I'm Naruto Uzumaki, container for the Kyuubi." Killer B froze and looked closely at Naruto, who was confused. "How many tails can you control, yo?" he asked Naruto, who looked confused but held up 3 fingers, making Killer B think for a bit. While he was thinking, Kyuubi made her presence known via telepathic communication. "Hey Naruto, it's Kyuubi." Naruto jumped a bit and looked up before speaking out loud, "Kyuubi? How are you talking to me?" Killer B responded, "Yo, you being a Jinchuriki lets you telepathically chat with your tailed beast. Just think what you want to say to it and it'll hear it." Naruto nodded and thought back, "So what did you need, Kyuubi?" "I just wanted to tell you that this guy can almost perfectly control the 8 tails, so you should train with him so that he could teach you to control my power even more," she said in his mind. Naruto nodded and looked at Killer B, who looked like he was waiting for him. "So what did it say, fool? You fool." Naruto's sweat dropped again, but said, "Well, she wants me to train with you so I can control her more easily." Killer B crossed his arms and looked deep in thought, and Naruto realized that he was talking to his tailed beast. Jiraiya walked up and surprised Naruto, and Killer B looked up as Naruto spoke. "Hey, Hiro-senin, this is Killer B, he's like me, I think he was the one you were talking about, and I asked if he can train me to control the Kyuubi." Jiraiya looked at Killer B and back at Naruto, "And what did he say?" Killer B smirked, "Yo, I'll train you, fool, you fool." Naruto smiled and looked excited, "Awesome." Jiraiya nodded and the 3 of them began to walk. Naruto looked out the corner of his eye and saw 2 figures being chased by what appeared to be Anbu, but these 2 figures, 2 girls he noticed, were scared as they ran away, and Naruto spoke up, "Hey, where are we training?" Killer B told him where it was and Naruto nodded, "Thanks, I'll see you there, I want to look around a bit more." Killer B and Jiraiya nodded and walked on ahead. Naruto ran and leaped up and chased the Kumo Anbu. He caught up to them a few minutes later and they had cornered the 2 girls. Naruto heard the Anbu talking, "Now come back and we won't have to hurt you." One of the girls spoke out, "Yeah right, they betrayed us, so no. We won't go back." The Anbu moved forward and Naruto jumped and landed between the Anbu and the girls. The Anbu stopped and the girls looked up at Naruto surprised. The head Anbu spoke up, "Get out of the way, Konoha Shinobi." Naruto shook his head, "Sorry, I'm afraid I can't do that." "And why can't you?" "Simple, I heard every word these girls said to you, someone obviously betrayed them and they don't want to go back, so I figured I'd give them a hand." The Anbu saw that Naruto wouldn't budge in his decision and attacked and Naruto went through some hand seals, Fuetin. Tatapa. The Anbu were blown back except one, the leader. He charged forward and threw a kunai at Naruto, who countered with his own and put his hands in the familiar cross hand sign, Shadow Clone Jutsu. Several Naruto appeared and they began to fight. A few Naruto slid under the Anbu's guard and kicked him up into the air as other clones dropped down on him along with the original, shouting, "Naruto Uzumaki Barrage." Naruto and the rest of his clones kicked the Anbu captain at the same time, sending him flying towards the ground. He slammed into the ground and fell unconscious as Naruto landed beside him, his clones dispelling as he looked at the girls. "Are you two okay?" he asked. The girls blushed a bit, especially when he reached down to help them up. Instead of accepting his hand, they stood up and crashed into him, each hugging him from both sides, saying, "Thank you, you saved us." The girls rested their heads on his shoulders, causing Naruto to blush at the close contact. Naruto looked at the girl on his right. She was wearing Anbu-like gear, only her pants were green and her top was purple with green edging on her armor, and the girl on his left was the exact reverse with purple pants and green top with purple edging on her armor. Not that I want to be rude or anything, but why are you holding me like this?" The girls opened their eyes and Naruto noticed their eyes were different colors, one eye was green and the other was purple, but the eyes were reversed for the girls. The girls let go and one looked down shyly and the other looked at Naruto, but both were blushing and they said, "Sorry." Naruto sighed and even though he suddenly felt like they was being watched, said, "It's alright, but who are you two?" Chapter 7 Disclaimers. I don't own Naruto in any way, shape or form. Naruto was blushing up a storm as these 2 girls hugged him. Not to be rude or anything, but why are you hugging me?" The girls opened their eyes as he said this and looked at him. The girl on the right had purple pants and a green top with purple edging on her Anbu armor. The girl on his left was wearing the reverse, green pants and a purple top with green edging in her Anbu armor. Naruto looked at their eyes and saw that the girl on his right had 2 different colored eyes, the right being a deep purple, the left being a brilliant green. The girl on his left had the same eyes, but they were reversed, her right eye being the brilliant green and the left eye being a deep purple. The girls let go of him and the one on his left looked down shyly, blushing lightly and scuffing her foot against the dirt, while the girl who was on his right was looking right at him, but also blushing. They both looked at each other and nodded, seeming to know what each other is thinking, and bowed to Naruto. Sorry, but we were just grateful that you saved us. Naruto waved, still blushing from feeling their bodies pressed up against him. Don't worry about it, I would be lying if I said I didn't enjoy it, but anyways, why were those Anbu chasing you? The girls immediately had a sad look on their faces and looked down. Someone attacked the Raikage, and they posed as us while doing so. They framed us for the crime, and now we're hunted by the Anbu because they don't believe we are innocent. Naruto looked at them carefully through his sunglasses and saw that they were telling the truth. Naruto walked up and hugged them comfortingly. The girls were surprised and hugged him back. Jiraiya appeared to this scene and saw the Anbu lying on the ground and sighed as Killer Bee came up and raised an eyebrow. Yo, impressive kid, you beat a squad of Anbu, not bad for a fool. Naruto looked up and turned around, and the girls looked scared and hid behind him. Killer Bee laughed and held his hands out in a calm down gesture. Chill yo, chill. Killer Bee ain't one to let this spill. The girls looked nervous, but walked out from behind Naruto and nodded. Now Naruto, well I'm impressed that you beat a squad of Kumo Anbu. You need to have more restraint, Jiraiya said sighing, but secretly planning to get Naruto with those two girls so he could have lots of research material for his books, since he could see that the girls were obviously, though discreetly to Naruto due to his cluelessness, looking at him with blushes. 9 months later, Naruto and Jiraiya were standing by the gate with the Raikage and Killer Bee, and the two girls who had introduced themselves as Lexi, the one with green top and purple pants, and the other was Darien, the girl with a purple top and green pants. They said they were twins, but they weren't born identical. The Raikage, who was incidentally Killer Bee's older brother, had taken quite some time to be convinced of Darien and Lexi's innocence. But with help from Killer Bee, they were able to confirm that they weren't the ones who had attacked however, due to them growing attached to Naruto they asked if they could join the ranks of Konoha. Who was aware of their infatuation with Naruto, agreed only if Naruto swore to take care of them, which he swore without hesitation as he had grown attached to them as well, though not as close as they wanted him to be. They were satisfied to wait until he grew to love them and had secretly agreed to share him. Well Naruto, Darien, Lexi, it's time to head out. The three nodded, and Darien and Lexi turned to the Raikage and bowed saying, thank you for allowing us to go with him. Nodded smiling, don't worry, just be sure to take care of yourselves and of Naruto here. Raikage winked at them when no one else was paying attention, and they blushed wondering what he was implying. Killer Bee walked up to Naruto and held out his fist. Yo, take care Lil 9, you trained hard, so you'll just fine. Naruto laughed while sweat dropping with everyone else, but bumped fists with him nodding as he adjusted his sunglasses. He had already shared his secret with the girls in B, and they swore not to tell anyone. Jiraiya, Naruto, Darien, and Lexi walked away waving bye to and Killer Bee who waved back to them. When they were gone, one of A's most trusted Jonin arrived. Lord Raikage, shall I follow to make sure they don't get up to anything? I looked at the man beside him. He was middle-aged, had the dark tanned skin that was quite common in Kumo, spiky white hair that covered his right eyes, and a permanent bored expression on his face. No Dari, stay here, they won't cause any trouble for anyone except those who cause trouble for them, A said chuckling. Dari nodded and disappeared via Shunshin. He turned around and went back to his office to deal with the worst enemy known to mankind, the only enemy that even his strongest Taijutsu nor his legendary speed only matched by the Yondaime Hokage, Minato Namikaze, and his Hiraishin couldn't defeat, paperwork. Meanwhile outside of Kumo, Naruto was examining a scroll on the Shinra Tensei Banshu Tenin and Chibaku Tensei that he had found a week before they arrived at the gates of Kumo. Flashback no Jutsu. Naruto and Jiraiya had stopped in a large clearing with a nearby river. Okay Naruto, we're gonna stop and rest here for a while, I'll go look for some food and you fill up our water skins at that river, got it? Naruto nodded, got it. When Jiraiya left Naruto pulled out the Icha novel he bought and while going to the river he picked up where he left off. He now understood why Kakashi, Hiruzen, and if the rumors he heard were true, Itachi Uchiha, A.N. I was bored, read this book, it was great, but he would never tell anyone that due to his pride. As Naruto was reaching the river, the collapsed beneath him and he fell, throwing the water skins, but for some reason his Icha novel stayed in hand. Naruto landed with a hard thud in an underground tunnel and shook his head as he got up. Where the hell am I? Naruto saw writing on the wall of the tunnel and noticed that the stone wasn't natural. It was hand-carved stone, meaning someone was once here. Naruto followed the tunnel and reached what appeared to be a dead end. He was about to turn around when he noticed a circular impression in the wall. He pushed it a bit and it slid back an inch. Naruto was surprised and pushed, moving it a few more inches before it stopped moving back at all. Naruto was confused and leaned on it. He then noticed a perfectly straight crack in the side of the entranceway. Naruto gave a gentle nudge in the direction on the door and to his surprise it slid in. He pushed it in and when it was open enough he first noticed, to his utter shock, a tomb and a medium-sized scroll resting on top of the coffin in the center of the room. Then he noticed a notch in the side of the door, which he assumed was used to pull the door back into place. He walked in and saw the scroll was actually one of three. They all had writing on them, but they were so dusty and old that he could barely read them without the proper lighting. He picked them up carefully and looked around, expecting a trap to be activated. Fortunately he was safe and looked and say the kanji for here lies the Rakuto Sennin. Naruto was shocked and looked at the scrolls and then walked out closing the tomb on his way out. He reached the way he came in and heard a voice shouting, "Naruto. Where are you?" Naruto shouted out, "I'm down here." Jiraiya found Naruto soon after and helped him out of the tunnel. Naruto explained what he found and Jiraiya used an earth jutsu to seal the hole while Naruto looked at the scrolls he had found. They were labeled Shinra Tensei Banshu Tenin and Jibaku Tensei. Flashback no Jutsu. Kai. Naruto had begun to learn the techniques in the scrolls but was surprised when he could only open one scroll at a time and only after he had mastered the one before it. Naruto looked up from the scroll and, holding out one hand, focused his chakra on a nearby rock and he whispered, "Shinra Tensei." The rock then flew away from him and he smiled and jumped up in excitement, "Yay, I got it." Jiraiya, who was watching, smiled and walked up, "Good job Gaki, I'm impressed, now you need to master it and then the second, and when you master that you can learn the third technique." Naruto nodded and he felt two pairs of arms wrap around him and he looked behind him to see Darien and Lexi hugging him smiling, "Good job Naru-kun, yay Naru-kun." Good job. They both then kissed one of his cheeks, causing Naruto to blush and Jiraiya to giggle and look mischievous. Naruto was unused to all the attention he was getting from Darien and Lexi, but he secretly enjoyed it. They started being clingy the second month of his training with B, where Naruto had met Yujito Nai, Jinchuriki of the Nibi, who, ironically, was the most perverted tailed beast. Soon after he met Yujito's adoptive sister, Samui Nai, and her friends Kari and Amoy. They all quickly became friends and Kari, Samui, and Yujito became surrogate sisters for Naruto, and Amoy became a good friend. Naruto looked at Darien and Lexi smiling, causing said girls to blush. When Jiraiya turned away the girls pulled Naruto close and pressed their bodies to him and kissed his cheeks again and let him go. When Naruto turned around Darien was winking and Lexi smiling shyly, both blushing, as they walked to another part of their temporary camp. Naruto smiled back, his face just as red as theirs. He sat down and Kyuubi spoke up, "Looks like somebody is in love." Naruto blushed and spoke back to Kyuubi, "W what? And no, we're just good friends, that's all." Kyuubi laughed as she teased him some more and after teasing him for close to an hour, she finally left him alone, laughing in the seal which Naruto had changed from a sewer to a large valley, with a forest, a field of flowers and a single large tree, and lots of little animals roaming, especially foxes, since Kyuubi loved playing with the kit foxes. Naruto went to his tent and fell asleep since it was dusk and Jiraiya, Darien, and Lexi did the same. Jiraiya was writing a letter to Kakashi and Tsunade to tell them and the other genin how Naruto was doing. Darien and Lexi was busy talking. To most they would look like they were talking about nonsense, but in reality, they were actually planning on how to make Naruto fall for them. As they were discussing this Naruto felt a shiver go up his spine, "Man, I feel like someone's going to do something crazy." Yawn, "Maybe I'm just tired." Naruto and everyone fell asleep except Jiraiya as he gave the message scroll to a messenger toad who took it and disappeared in a puff of smoke. In the middle of the night however, two shadows slipped into Naruto's tent. The next day, Naruto woke up with a yawn and felt something or rather two things on him. When he opened his eyes, he was shocked to find Darien and Lexi cuddling up to him under the blanket, Lexi on Naruto's left and Darien on Naruto's right. Naruto blushed as he felt them shift in their sleep and wrap their arms around him. Naruto looked at them and saw they had mischievous smiles on their faces and figured they must have planned this. Naruto sighed and shook them, waking them up. They yawned cutely and looked up at Naruto with sleepy eyes and then laid their heads back on his chest and mumbled 5 more minutes. Naru-kun. Naruto sweat dropped and substituted himself with a random rock outside and heard the girls say, "Oh," in disappointment. Naruto sighed and shook his head but smiled softly. Then he turned to Jiraiya who was chuckling silently and had an annoyed look, "You knew they were in there, didn't you?" Jiraiya burst out laughing while nodding his head. Suddenly a rock flew and hit Jiraiya square between the eyes and then Naruto burst out laughing at his prank, using his gravity manipulation to throw the rock at Jiraiya. Jiraiya stood up and shouted, "You little brat, why did you do that?" Naruto laughed even harder as he said, "Ha ha ha, because it was funny as hell." Jiraiya walked up and slammed his fist down onto Naruto's head, causing him to hit the ground, but soon he puffed in a cloud of smoke and Naruto was laughing in a tree nearby as the girls came out to see what was so funny. When they saw the red mark from the rock hitting Jiraiya between the eyes they also started laughing, already figuring out what happened. Jiraiya was sitting on the ground in the fetal position with a storm cloud hanging over his head as he poked the ground with a stick saying, "You kids are cruel." A few minutes later they were eating breakfast like nothing ever happened. Jiraiya finished first and looked at the group. Okay, we have 2 more years left for your training, Naruto, so we have to make the most of it and get you as strong as possible. Naruto nodded and put his sunglasses on as he had finished soon after Jiraiya and he stood up stretching. Okay, Iro-senin, let's get moving. Jiraiya nodded and took the front as Naruto as well as Darien and Lexi each pulled out an Icha novel and began to read. Naruto and Darien were into the book, but Lexi kept glancing up at Jiraiya since she was embarrassed to admit that she liked the series just as much as Naruto and Darien. Darien would only admit that she liked the series to whoever noticed, and only Naruto and Lexi noticed, so only him and Lexi knew. Naruto sensed Jiraiya about to turn around so he hid the book, and so did Lexi and Darien. Jiraiya looked at them and said, "Look out over there." Jiraiya pointed, and Naruto looked out and saw a group of people who were traveling like them, and Naruto spoke out, "Cool, are they traveling like we are?" Jiraiya shook his head, "No, those are nomads, they move from place to place having no real home for one reason or another." Naruto looked at the tribe of nomads and noticed that they were heading in the same general direction as them. Naruto judged when they would meet and it seemed they would meet in about 20 meters ahead of where they were then. A few minutes of slow travel passed and the nomads had pulled their group up and traveled alongside Jiraiya's group. The nomad's leader and Jiraiya began to talk when Naruto accidentally bumped into a woman with long red hair. "Oh, sorry miss, I wasn't paying attention." The woman looked at him with her violet eyes and smiled. "It's alright, young man." The woman then looked at Naruto and they both stopped as she narrowed her eyes and looked at him with a confused expression which Naruto returned. The woman then began rubbing her head as if it hurt a bit and said, "I don't know why, but you look very familiar." Naruto tilted his head and the woman giggled at how cute he looked to her. She then looked ahead and they noticed the nomads had stopped and that they were doing business with Jiraiya and went back to talking. It seemed that the woman was suffering from amnesia and couldn't remember anything about herself, not even her name. Naruto felt sad as they continued talking. Jiraiya looked around and saw Darien and Lexi looking at some jewelry and then they moved on to look at some kunai and shuriken. Jiraiya then looked towards the back of the group and saw Naruto talking to a woman who suddenly fell clutching her head. Jiraiya was about to go when he saw her hair and was frozen with shock. He was thinking, "It can't be." Naruto dropped beside the woman as she suddenly collapsed, holding her head gasping for air, as if she had been holding her breath for a long time. Naruto looked extremely worried as he felt very close to this woman. "Hey miss, are you alright? Hey, come on, what's wrong? Do you need some help?" The woman suddenly went still and was breathing heavily. She then picked herself up from the ground and Naruto ran and supported her when he noticed that she was shaky, barely having her balance. Naruto looked up at the woman who had her eyes tightly shut and her hands on her head. She then sighed and let go of her head. She looked around and said, What the? Where am I? What happened?" She began to panic and look around until she felt someone grab her hand and she turned around growling fiercely, but when she saw Naruto, she felt like her heart froze along with her body. Her eyes were wide with shock as she took in his features, his spiky blonde hair, his 6 whisker marks, 3 on each cheek. She fell to her knees in front of Naruto and with tears in her eyes she hugged him. Naruto was very confused. First she acts like her head was going to explode, then she acts like she is lost. Then she is about to attack and now here she is crying into his shoulder muttering something he couldn't understand through her sobs. She lifted her head and looked at him, smiling and she spoke, "Is your name Naruto?" Naruto, being shocked that she knew his name, only nodded and she smiled and hugged him again saying over and over again, "I prayed, I hoped you were still alive and that I could see you again." Naruto was even more confused. Miss, who are you exactly?" The woman leaned back looking shocked and sad before saying, "I guess you were never told." Naruto looked confused as the woman continued, "You were never told who your parents were you?" Naruto shook his head and the woman hugged him saying, "Well, I'll tell you who I am since you ask." She pulled back, giving Naruto a loving smile. "My name is Kushina Uzumaki." "Naruto, I'm your mother." Naruto was shocked and so was Jiraiya who had walked up not alerting the two. End of chapter. Chapter 8. Disclaimers. I don't own the anime manga Naruto in any way, shape, or form. Naruto was stunned by what the woman, now known as Kushina, had just told him. "Why you're my mother?" Kushina hugged Naruto tighter and spoke as she cried tears of joy. Yes I am, and I'm so sorry for not being there for you. Will you ever forgive me?" Naruto hugged her back, tears streaming down his cheeks as he smiled. "Of course mom, you told me you had amnesia, so I know it wasn't your fault, but what happened? How did you get amnesia? And why did my dad leave me alone?" Kushina then let him go and frowned at him. "You really don't know your own father?" Naruto shook his head and just before she could say who his father was, they heard a voice, "K Kushina. Is that really you?" Kushina turned around and saw Jiraiya and smiled. "Jiraiya. It's so good to see you." Kushina stood up and hugged Jiraiya and he hugged her back gently and smiled. I thought you were dead, how did you survive?" Kushina looked sad and closed her eyes deep in thought. It was about 12 or 13 years ago, before the Kyuubi attacked the village. I was pregnant with Naruto, and my husband was using his skills in sealing to keep the Kyuubi inside me in check. Wait, you mean you had the Kyuubi inside you before me? Naruto said, interrupting her story. Kushina looked at Naruto and nodded, yes, now please don't interrupt until I'm done please. Naruto nodded and was silent. Anyways, Naruto's father was keeping the seal intact since it weakens during pregnancy. Jiraiya nodded, remembering that day like it happened yesterday, as Kushina continued, however, despite the barriers placed around the area where I was giving birth, which was supposed to prevent our enemies from discovering our location, a strange man did manage to get in with the intention of kidnapping me. Naruto looked shocked but remained silent. Kushina smiled at him for listening to her despite this being their first meeting aside from when he was born. This man forced your father to choose between me and you, and he managed to get you away from him, and managed to sneak me away as we ran towards the house we wanted to raise you in. Our home that we had lived in for a long time together. Naruto smiled and looked down as Darien and Lexi walked up and noticed Kushina talking, and Jiraiya and Naruto listening, so they sat down beside Naruto, which Kushina noticed as they leaned on his shoulders, and thought the sight was adorable. She continued her story, when we arrived at our home, your father walked outside, but somehow the man managed to track us to where we were, and slipped in and grabbed me while you were in my arms, however he dropped you back into your crib and took me away. Kushina took a breath and continued, your father fought him when he found us, but by then he had set up a temporary barrier, and with the time he had released the Kyuubi. However, before the Kyuubi could run away this man looked at it and its eyes turned a darker red and it stayed still as if turned to stone. She sighed and looked at Naruto, admiring how he looked so much like Minato, except for those sunglasses. She didn't understand why he had them, but they made him look attractive. Kushina immediately beat herself mentally thinking, no Kushina, this is your son, but Kami, why does he have to look so mysterious and attractive? No, I can't be falling for him, he's my son. Just calm down Kushina, telling the tale of how I lost my memory will help distract me from my hot son. No. Stop focus. Kushina took a deep breath and continued her story, while Naruto wondered what was going on, because she had just looked at him and Darien and Lexi and started blushing. Anyways, when the man had done this, he ran away, and somehow opened some kind of vortex and transported himself somewhere, most likely the village. Then my husband ran after him not knowing that this man had left me where I was. The man obviously summoned the Kyuubi because just before losing consciousness, I saw it disappear as if it was summoned, and after that I lost consciousness, and the next thing I know I'm here with you, and I recognized you almost immediately because of your hair and those whisker marks on your cheeks. When you were born I thought they were so cute, but now they look so much cuter on you. Kushina blushed a bit, but not as much as Naruto and Darien, and Lexi laughed at Naruto who they thought looked cuter than usual. Kushina suddenly felt jealous when she saw the two girls clinging onto Naruto, but then remembered something else and smiled. Oh, I just remembered, Naruto, I forgot to tell you that you have sisters. Databane. Naruto froze and looked at her with a shocked expression. Ah, really? Kushina nodded and smiled even bigger. Yay, I forgot about her, but the memory just came back. You have a twin sister and two older sisters who are twins as well. However, I'm not sure why you weren't sent with them because I remembered telling your father to send all four of you to my sister's home until it was time for you all to enter the academy, which I was supposed to also give word when it was safe, but due to my amnesia I couldn't. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Naruto, your older sister's names are Natsumi and Makina. Your twin sister's name is Mihane. Naruto looked shocked but then smiled and hugged Kushina. Kushina was surprised and hugged him back, battling herself inside over the feeling she now felt for Naruto. Naruto let go and smiled his foxy smile, making Kushina, Darien, and Lexi blush. Naruto then looked confused. Who was my father? Kushina smiled and said, you really haven't figured that out yet. He was Minato Namikaze, the Yondaime Hokage. Naruto looked at her with stars in his eyes, making the girls and Kushina blush yet again. Kushina then stopped herself and leaned in looking at his sunglasses. Naruto, why are you wearing sunglasses? Everyone froze and Naruto looked at Jiraiya as he shrugged, not knowing what to say. Naruto looked at Kushina and sighed. It's kind of an S-rank secret. Kushina just smiled a sweet smile that made Naruto shiver in fear. Naruto, please tell me why you have sunglasses on. Naruto nodded quickly in fear of his life and sighed. He reached up and took his sunglasses off but held his eyes closed. Kushina was wondering why his eyes were closed until he opened his eyes. When she saw his eyes, she gasped and took a step back in shock as she took in his pale purple eyes with several black rings surrounding a single dot-like pupil. She was shocked that her son had the Dijutsu from her clan's ancestor, the Rakuto Sennin. She was nervous as she spoke. Why you have TR Rinnegan? Naruto nodded, wondering what freaked her out so much. Kushina looked down and then back at Naruto. How is that possible? Naruto, I want you to tell me about your life in the village, tell me everything and don't leave anything out. Naruto nodded and started telling her about his life. He told her of the beatings, the harsh words, and the fact that the civilian council kept trying to have him executed and/or banished from Konoha just because they hated him. Kushina was already ready to grind everyone in Konoha into a bloody mess. Then Naruto got to the part of his life where he became a ninja, and Kushina was proud of him, fighting an A-ranked rogue shinobi and a B-ranked rogue shinobi with a Kage Genkai. Naruto told her about Sakura, but soon after Kushina sighed and looked at Naruto sadly. "Naruto, this Sakura girl may be pretty, but she's a Haruno. I know her mother, Sakuma Haruno. She basically gave men of high power and ranking her body in order to reach the rank of civilian council member. Most likely her daughter only likes the Sasuke for his power and the fact that he is the last Uchiha. It's the same with all female Haruno family members." Naruto looked confused at first, but suddenly realized what she was saying and nodded, looking disappointed as he found truth in her words about Sakura. Naruto put his sunglasses on and they stood up. Kushina went to the leader of the nomadic tribe and told her, "An. Yes, the leader of the tribe is a woman, so any sexist idiots better not say anything." She bowed to the woman in thanks for taking care of her and came back to the group and smiled brightly, causing Naruto to blush a bit. "Well, shall we head out?" Jiraiya nodded, smiling just as brightly, but Kushina walked up and whispered something in his ear, and suddenly he looked like he was struggling to keep his smile up and walked ahead of the group shakily as Naruto looked confused but started walking beside his mother and blushed as he looked at her. Her long red hair was flowing in the wind, he thought her violet eyes were amazing, and her milky skin looked soft. As Naruto thought this, he started blushing, which Kushina noticed as he stared at her. She blushed also, and suddenly Darien and Lexi grabbed Kushina and pulled her back, telling Naruto that they wanted a private moment to talk. Naruto nodded and turned around, walking on ahead. But Kushina, Darien, and Lexi. Kushina looked at Darien and Lexi, who looked at her with knowing expressions, making Kushina blush, and Darien spoke out, surprising Kushina with what she said. "Don't worry, Kushi-chan, we'll share him with you." Darien winked, making Kushina blush even more. What are you talking about? "He's my S'. Oh, be quiet, we both saw how you looked at him. It wasn't like a mother looking at her son, it was a woman looking at a hot guy." Darien moved up to her ear and whispered, "Like I said before, we'll share him with you." They both nodded at her and ran ahead, leaving a blushing Kushina slowly walking behind them, watching as Darien and Lexi hugged Naruto, making him blush. Kushina chuckled, thinking, "He really is cute. Oh, who am I kidding, my son is hot, Dadabane." Kushina blushed and wondered what her sister and Naruto's sisters would think. In the Whirlpool country, 3 beautiful young girls and 1 sexy woman sneezed at the same time. Back with Naruto's group, Kushina blushed as she suddenly thought about if she got into a relationship with her son, and suddenly a little bit of blood ran from her nose at the perverted thoughts she had, which she quickly wiped away. She looked up at Naruto and saw him holding a small orange book, and her eye twitched. "No way, is he actually?" She observed closer and saw it was the dreaded book that shall remain unnamed by all women. Then she noticed that Darien and Lexi had the books too, and she had a sickly sweet smile as she walked up to Naruto and grabbed all 3 of them and pulled them back out of Jiraiya's hearing and said, "Naruto, Darien, Lexi, can you tell me why you have that book?" The 3 shivered in fear when Kushina pulled them back, but now they were absolutely terrified as Naruto spoke. "T traveling with Jiraiya. I guess he rubbed off on me, but I haven't told him. I read these." Kushina sweat dropped and suddenly slammed her fist into all 3 of their heads, Naruto first and Lexi last. They walked along holding their heads as they winced at the pain from Kushina's punches. Kushina shook her head, sighing, then looked back at Naruto and smiled. She then looked ahead and they all caught up with Jiraiya. Jiraiya turned to Naruto, who had pulled out the second scroll from the tomb of the Rakuto Sennin, the scroll labeled Banshu Tenin. Kushina read it over his shoulder, fascinated by the gravity techniques of the Rinnegan. Naruto began to focus, held out his hand at a rock and said, "Banshu Tenin." The rock wiggled a little bit and dragged about an inch towards Naruto before stopping. Kushina giggled at how he got frustrated as he reminded her of herself when she was his age. She was also secretly proud that he had the same goal as her at that age, to be the best Hokage. She knew that he would make it, not because of those eyes, but because of his determination alone. Naruto was practicing for over an hour before Jiraiya said that he should see if the scroll had any extra tips. Naruto nodded and began to read the scroll. He was so focused on the scroll that he barely noticed Darien and Lexi walking beside him. They then grabbed 1 arm each and held onto him as he complained, "Hey, come on, you 2, stop it, I'm trying to read the scroll." They ignored him and held his arms closer as he blushed. Kushina, watching from behind, felt jealous. "Aw, why can't I hold Naruto like that?" By the time Kushina realized what she thought, she blushed and immediately slowed down a bit so no one would notice. Kushina watched as Darien and Lexi clung to Naruto's arms, but then, Darien looked back and winked with a sultry expression as she mouthed the words, "Don't worry, you'll get your turn soon enough." Kushina blushed even more, and Darien giggled and turned back to Naruto. Meanwhile, Naruto was blushing, but managed to read the scroll while the girls begged for his attention, and a few hours and a few failures at trying to get a hang of the technique later, reached out to a rock they were passing as he said, Banshu Tenon. The rock flew and landed in Naruto's hand, and he slipped out of the girl's arms as he jumped up shouting, I did it. Yay, I finally did it. Kushina smiled and walked up. She leaned down and kissed his cheek before whispering in his ear, good job Naruto-kun, you're getting better, she then giggled. Darien looked at Kushina with a smirk, and Lexi looked shyly at her as Kushina hugged Naruto who was blushing from the kiss. Time skip, 2 months before the training journey ends outside the land of waves. Naruto walked through and looked around remembering all that happened there. It was the area where they fought Zabuza Mamachi for the first time. When they arrived at the bridge Tazuna built, they were all surprised, except Jiraiya of course, at the name of the bridge. It was called the Great Naruto Bridge. Naruto was awed that they named the bridge after him, and Kushina was so proud of her son because of this accomplishment. They crossed the bridge and walked into the town and saw the people were more prosperous than before. When they saw Naruto they waved hello and Naruto returned it just as happily. He was glad that they were free of Gato and his henchmen, now they could prosper and live better lives. Naruto walked up to a house he recognized instantly. He smiled as he knocked on the door. Kushina walked up behind him and said, Naruto, do you know this house? Naruto nodded as the door opened and a beautiful young woman stood in the doorway. She had on a pink shirt and a plain, long blue skirt that reached her ankles. Her hair was a dark blue-black color that went down past her shoulders, and her eyes were black but held gentle warmth in them. When she saw who it was she smiled brightly and pulled him into a friendly hymn saying, Naruto, it's so good to see you. When did you get back here? Naruto smiled and hugged her back and answered her, I got here just now, me and Jiraiya here have been traveling around training, and we picked up a few friends, and on our way back to Konoha, we decided to stop by and say hey, and spend some time around here to see how everything is going. Tsunami smiled again and called out behind her, Inari, come down here please. We have some very special guests. A voice called out from upstairs, and the sound of someone coming downstairs was heard. Suddenly Inari walked into the room and spoke, hey mom, who's our special guest? He froze when he saw Naruto smiling. Hey Inari, it's good to see you again. You've really grown. Inari took in Naruto's appearance. He was wearing a black jacket with a darker shade of orange than he wore the first time Inari saw him near the center, and a pair of dark orange pants. His headband had a black cloth on it, and the cloth was extra long allowing it to blow in the wind. Just imagine his Shippuden style of clothes. And Naruto Niasen, is that you? Naruto nodded and smiled again. He looked at Inari and saw he had changed from the small scrawny kid he knew almost 3 years ago. He had grown a foot taller and had on a black muscle shirt with grey baggy shorts. Inari smiled and held out his hand to Naruto. It's great to see you Naruto Niasen. Naruto grinned and shook his hand. Tsunami noticed the rest of the group and smiled, greeting them as well. She noticed Kushina, Darien and Lexi and smiled at them. Hello, my name is Tsunami, what are your names? Darien and Lexi bowed. My name is Darien. My name is Lexi. Tsunami bowed back to them and turned to Kushina. My name is Kushina Uzumaki. My son told me quite a bit about you, Inari, and Tazuna. Tsunami looked surprised, then took a slightly angry expression that Kushina knew was about. Naruto said he had no parents. If you are his mother, where were you at his whole life? Kushina sighed and looked at Tsunami sadly. 16 years ago when the Kyuubi attacked Konoha, a man attacked me and my husband. What I'm going to tell you is top secret, you can't tell anyone, okay? Tsunami nodded and Kushina breathed deeply and continued, I was attacked by a man during my pregnancy with Naruto. He went after me because I was the container for the Kyuubi before my son. He kidnapped me after I gave birth and released the Kyuubi from within me. He then left me for dead where I fell unconscious. Apparently sometime after that I awoke in a caravan of nomads but suffered from amnesia. And just last year, I met Naruto and his group and regained my memories. Tsunami looked sad and placed a hand on Kushina's shoulder and smiled gently. If that is what happened, then I will forgive you for not being there for him. Kushina nodded, thank you, and now let's go with everyone else. Tsunami nodded, and they walked into the kitchen where everyone was talking. Naruto stood up and stretched. I'm gonna walk around the village. Kushina walked up to him. Do you mind if I come along? Naruto smiled. You can come along, I don't mind. Kushina smiled, and she and Naruto walked outside and around the village. A few minutes later, Naruto saw a woman with too many bags for her to carry, and he went over to her. Excuse me, do you need any help? The woman, who appeared to be in her early 50s, looked at him and smiled. Why thank you, most of these are groceries, but I also have some medicine for someone my family was asked to look after. Naruto nodded and picked up the heaviest bags, and Kushina, who was smiling at his kindness, walked up and grabbed some bags as well, and the three of them walked to the old woman's home, and Naruto set the groceries on the kitchen table, while Kushina and the woman went to the back room, where he heard Kushina gasp in shock. Naruto ran to the room they were in and saw a woman with milky white skin and black hair under some blankets, and she was breathing shallowly, and upon closer inspection, they noticed that she was in a coma. Naruto looked at his mother and saw her shocked expression. "What is it, mom? Do you know her?" Kushina just nodded and spoke softly as she stared at the woman before her. "It's my best friend Makoto Ichiha." End of chapter 8. Chapter 9. Disclaimers. I don't own the anime manga Naruto in any way, shape, or form. Naruto looked at Kushina and was surprised. "I thought Itachi massacred his whole clan besides Sasuke. So why is she alive and who is she?" Kushina walked up to Makoto and kneeled by her, taking Makoto's hand in her own. "Makoto is Sasuke's mother." Naruto was shocked even more. "Sasuke's mother?" Naruto stopped talking and began to think for a few seconds before speaking thoughtfully. "I wonder what Sasuke would do if he knew his mother was alive." Kushina looked back with a thoughtful expression that was mixed with happiness that her closest friend was alive. "I wonder that too. From what you told me, he was an arrogant prick." Naruto chuckled and nodded. "Yay, he is quite the bastard." Kushina giggled and looked back at Makoto. "I'm sure if Makoto knew what Sasuke was up to, she'd be furious at him, but at the same time sad that he turned out that way." Naruto nodded and looked at the woman who was smiling at Kushina. The woman spoke up. "This woman was brought to me by a friend of my deceased son. I believe his name was Itachi, like that boy said. He asked us to watch over her and that she would most likely wake up sometime within a few months after today exactly." Kushina and Naruto looked at each other and back at the woman, surprise etched on their faces. The woman laughed softly and smiled. "He said for me to bring her back to Konoha when she woke up, but since you are her friend and a shinobi as well, I'll let you take her back to Konoha, as long as you protect her and make sure she wakes up and knows what happened." Kushina smiled gratefully and nodded her thanks to the woman. Naruto smiled and looked at Makoto while thinking to himself, "She's beautiful. Honestly, if she is anything like my mom then Sasuke doesn't deserve to have her as a mother." Naruto looked at Kushina and then at Makoto and blushed a bit at her beauty. Kushina looked out of the corner of her eye and saw Naruto looking at Makoto and blush a bit. She smirked and giggled to herself as she thought, "Never knew Naruto had a thing for older women." Kushina then blushed as her mind began wandering on if Naruto liked her, but she pushed the thought out of her mind and focused on her friend. Naruto looked at Kushina and suddenly felt a strange attraction towards her. He was confused as he thought, "What the heck? Why does mom suddenly look so beautiful? Ah. I must resist this feeling. What if she gets pissed at me? I don't want her to hate me or worse, leave me alone again." Naruto looked back at Makoto and decided to leave the room and put up the groceries. The old woman came and helped and they finished quickly. Naruto and Kushina told the woman that in about 2 months they would be going back to Konoha, so they would get her then and bring her back with them to Konoha. The woman nodded and said she would take care of Makoto until then. Time skip, the day the group returns to Konoha. The group was almost to Konoha and was wondering what had changed in the village. And Jiraiya was wondering what Tsunade's reaction would be to the 2 new Konoha shinobi members and the reappearance of Kushina and Makoto, who was being carried on a stretcher by Darien and Lexi. They arrived outside the gates and Kotetsu and Izumo looked surprised and greeted them, but when they saw Kushina and Makoto, they were beyond shocked and Izumo left to tell Tsunade of the development at Jiraiya's request. Needless to say, when Tsunade heard that Kushina and Makoto were alive, she was happy for both women's returns. Kushina learned from Jiraiya that when she had gone missing and Minato was found dead, they were informed that their son died as well, and that Naruto had had the fox sealed in him, and Tsunade left the village in depression with Shizune following her, so she could take care of Tsunade. Meanwhile in the Hokage's office, Tsunade was reading the note she received from Jiraiya. "Tsunade, hey Tsunade, you won't believe what's been going on. First Naruto found a very sacred area, the tomb of the Rakuto Sennin, and had retrieved scrolls on the gravity element techniques that the Rinnegan is capable of using. Soon after that we arrived in Kumo to get Naruto trained in controlling the Kyuubi, since their previous Raikage was kicked off his seat of power and a new Raikage, A, took his place. We trained with the Raikage's brother, a Jinchuriki named Killer B, who was close to mastering the Hachibi, and his student, a young woman named Yujito Nai, who was learning to control her tailed beast, the Nibi. Before they started training however, Naruto rescued 2 Kumo shinobi who were framed for an attack on A, since he didn't desire to steal the Byakugan like his predecessor did. The attackers had framed these 2 shinobi for a reason unknown, but why they framed them is unknown, especially since these 2 kunoichi, Darien and Lexi they said, both possess the Kake Genkai for storm style. However, what is most amazing happened a year after we left Konoha. We found a person who we all believed to be dead, Kushina Uzumaki, the Red Death of Konoha. She said that some man in a mask attacked her and released the Kyuubi within her, then left her for dead. She was picked up by a caravan of nomads sometime after and developed amnesia. She regained her memory soon after meeting Naruto and convinced us to let her travel with us, which we agreed, especially Naruto when she said she was his mother. As we traveled Kushina gave Naruto some resistance seals and started training him in Kenjutsu. He doesn't have a katana of his own yet, but trust me, with his training he could give Heichaku a run for his money. And here is the last surprise. You remember the Uchiha massacre, right? Well, Itachi didn't spare Sasuke only. He also spared Makoto Uchiha, but put her in a coma, most likely with Tsukiyomi. Don't tell anyone, this is top secret and could possibly put her in danger. Naruto and Kushina said that Itachi purposefully spared her, but I don't know. We are close to Konoha now, and we will discuss the situation more in private. From Jiraiya. The Sate Tsunade was surprised was like saying she loved sake and gambling. Kushina and Makoto, two powerful kunoichi who were thought dead. Kushina, who was known as the Red Death of Konoha because of her mastery of Kinjutsu and her incredible speed, and Makoto, who was the goddess of substitution. She found out that she couldn't rely on the Sharingan all the time, so took time to make herself famous for another reason. She was so skilled with the substitution jutsu that she could take on 20 shinobi and have them attack and possibly kill each other within minutes, all within minutes of engaging them in combat. Tsunade smiled and allowed Shizune to look over the note. She was happy for several reasons, happy as a Hokage to get back two very experienced and skilled shinobi, happy as fellow kunoichi that Makoto and Kushina, two powerful kunoichi, returned, and happy as a regular person that Kushina and Makoto were alive since she was friends with them and, unknowingly to her at the time, close cousins with Kushina. She heard Shizune gasp and laughed softly as Shizune spoke up, "Is this true, Lady Tsunade? Are they really alive?" Tsunade nodded and looked out the window. "Yay, it's true. Me, you and Jiraiya will discuss it later, and I'll call a council meeting soon afterwards." Shizune nodded, and they walked out to the village gates. On the way she ran into Izumo, who told her that Jiraiya, Naruto and several others had arrived, and she smiled, nodding, and continued walking towards the gate. At the village gates, Naruto was talking to Kotetsu, and Jiraiya, Kushina, Darien, and Lexi were talking and taking care of Makoto. Naruto smiled and said, "So, has anything changed while I was away?" Kotetsu sighed and smiled a bit. "Well, I can certainly say that without your pranks. It's been very quiet." Naruto and Kotetsu laughed as Naruto spoke. "I don't doubt that, I am the king of pranks, so everyone must have gotten lazy while I was away. I might have to go around and get people back in shape and on their toes." Kotetsu laughed harder at the thought of people covered in paint and other harmless pranks that Naruto might have planned. Kushina walked up and saw Kotetsu chatting happily with Naruto and smiled. Darien and Lexi walked up to Naruto and hugged him, making Kotetsu smile at him perversely as he said, well Naruto, since when did you become such a ladies' man?" Naruto blushed and Darien and Lexi giggled and held onto him tighter. Kushina wasn't paying attention to the scene as she was taking care of Makoto, but Jiraiya did, and he giggled a bit at the possible research. Naruto slipped out of their grasp, and they said all from the loss of his body heat. Kotetsu laughed and looked around as he heard a cough. There was Tsunade with her pupil, Shizune, and everyone but Kotetsu and Makoto, still comatose, so of course she didn't and can't notice P, smiled and waved. Tsunade smiled with Shizune as Izumo arrived behind them and she said, "Welcome back everyone." Tsunade then looked at Kushina and was surprised and walked up to her, giving her a hug. "I hoped you were alive, and I'm so happy you are." Kushina smiled softly and hugged her back. "I missed you too." Tsunade and Kushina separated, and she looked down at Makoto and went into medic nin mode, examining her professionally and sighed in relief. "If I go by her steadily rising heart rate, she'll wake up within a month." Kushina, Naruto, Darien, and Lexi smiled and sighed in relief. Kushina because Makoto was her friend, Naruto because he fell for her without realizing it, and Darien and Lexi because they knew Naruto had fallen for Makoto and agreed that if she returned his feelings that they would share him with her as well. Naruto and Jiraiya went ahead of everyone and walked through Konoha. Naruto walked up and jumped to the top of a random light pole and looked out at Konoha and smiled. "This place hasn't changed a bit." Then a voice below was heard, "Naruto." Naruto looked down and saw Sakura looking surprised. Naruto jumped down and landed beside her as she looked at him. He had grown taller than her, and she was surprised by how his hair had grown. He looked a lot like the Yondaime Hokage, only he had whisker marks, his sunglasses that he got the day when he was released from the hospital, and his hair was only a little bit longer than it was when he left. Sakura looked at his sunglasses and then smiled. "Welcome back, Naruto." "Hey, you've gotten taller than me." Naruto looked up and measured his height to Sakura's and said, "Huh, I guess you're right." Sakura then stood in a little pose and said, "What about me, have I changed any?" Naruto smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes, something that was noticed by Jiraiya. "Are you kidding, Sakura? You haven't changed a bit." Sakura looked a bit annoyed, especially since she had trained her butt off for 3 years. She lifted her fist, about to punch Naruto again when Naruto jumped back and she missed, slamming her fist into the ground, making a crater appear. She picked herself up as Naruto gawked at the crater. "Geez, Sakura, you've got Granny's monster strength now." Sakura had a tick mark and she raised her fist to throw a punch at Naruto again. However, she saw a red blur and was met with a sword in her face, held by a woman with crimson red hair. Sakura gasped and froze as she saw the katana inches in front of her face, and she looked at the woman looking at her with malice in her eyes. The woman spoke out, "Is this that Haruno girl Naruto?" Naruto nodded, "Yay, that's Sakura. I thought she'd grown out of the hitting me phase, but obviously not." Kushina stood up straight and pulled the sword away from Sakura, who was outraged. "Who do you think you are? My mother will have your head for attacking me, she's on the council." Kushina simply took out a cloth and started polishing her katana with a bored expression and replied, "You mean Sakumo Haruno? That whore couldn't touch me, she's pathetically weak, and in our childhood she always followed my husband around the way you follow this last Uchiha around. But look what happened, I married him and she didn't." Sakura was confused, her mother wanted someone else besides her father and she acted the same way she does around Sasuke. This man must have been hot and famous and she didn't know why this woman got him instead of her mother. Sakura was interrupted from her thoughts when Kushina spoke up, "And one last thing, don't you even think of attacking Naruto. If you do I won't hold myself and my blade back like I did this time." Sakura was shocked, she held herself back. Sakura hadn't seen anything but a crimson-red blur. Kushina sheathed her katana and walked away with Naruto and Jiraiya walking close behind. Sakura was surprised at Naruto's attitude when he replied to the red-haired woman. She watched as they walked away with a slightly annoyed attitude, along with lots of fear of that woman. However, she soon forgot about the woman when she saw Sasuke walk by and she ran off after him shouting, "Sasuke, wait up." Sasuke was only slightly punished since the council voted that he not pass Jonin, though the shinobi half of the council voted him to be thrown in prison. They were outmatched by the civilian council since some of the shinobi clan heads on the council were out on missions and were replaced by clan members who secretly supported the civilian council and thought Sasuke Uchiha was the best thing to happen to Konoha and thought Naruto was the Kyuubi incarnate. Unfortunately for Tsunade, she couldn't overrule the votes and had to comply with them. Sasuke was slightly annoyed but dealt with it like he always did, brooding. Sakura still followed him around like a lost puppy because she was infatuated with him. She was weak in his eyes, even if a Sannin trained her, because she was a fangirl. However, despite that she was persistent, never gave up, kind of like that annoying blonde Sasuke thought as he remembered Naruto's eyes. He had done some research but couldn't find out what it was. His entire eyes, even the whites of his eyes, had turned pale purple with multiple rings around a dot-like pupil, the thickest ring being where the color of a regular eye meets the white of a normal eye. Sasuke was anything but an idiot, he knew as soon as he saw Naruto's eyes that Naruto had a Dijutsu. That was the name of the Dijutsu that evaded him, and every time he closed his eyes he saw those eyes, they seemed so familiar and yet foreign to him. Sasuke sighed in annoyance when Sakura ran up and spoke up, "What do you want?" Sakura stopped beside Sasuke and said, "Have you heard yet?" Sasuke didn't want to admit it, but she had just caught his interest. He heard a lot of news around the village, so what could she know that he didn't? Heard what? Naruto's back in Konoha. Sasuke froze and had a shocked expression that turned into anger. So he's come back. Well, now I can prove to him that I'm better than he is. Then once he realizes I'm superior to him he will help me convince that old bat Tsunade to let me hunt down Itachi. Sasuke smiled a dark smile and looked at Sakura before speaking. "I want you to tell Naruto in 3 days to meet me at the Chunin Exam Coliseum so we can spar, we can finish our match." "That you and Kakashi interrupted." Sakura nodded and ran off, leaving a smirking Sasuke. With Naruto, Kushina, Darien, Lexi and Jiraiya in the Hokage Tower. Naruto arrived at the Hokage mansion with Jiraiya and Kushina and saw waiting Tsunade, Darien, Lexi and Shizune. Shizune smiled and waved at Naruto, who waved back after removing his sunglasses. Naruto looked around and Tsunade answered his unasked question. "We moved Mikoto to a certain hiding place." "Your home?" Naruto was confused. "Why my home? It's such a small apartment." Tsunade looked at everyone in the room and nodded at Kushina before speaking. "No Naruto, not at your old apartment. You are moving into your father's home." Naruto was surprised and smiled brightly. "Awesome Dadabeo." Everyone laughed at the way he acted and Naruto's stomach suddenly growled and he rubbed the back of his head embarrassed. Guess I'm a bit hungry, I'm heading to Ichiraku's, so I'll see you all later." Tsunade told Naruto how to get to the clan house he would be living in and he left after putting his sunglasses back on. Naruto arrived at Ichiraku's and walked in smiling. "Hey Tucci, hey AM, long time no see." AM turned around and saw Naruto. She smiled and ran around the counter and hugged him. "Naruto, it's been too long, how have you been?" Naruto smiled as he hugged her back. "I've been good, I've gotten a lot stronger, so now I have a better shot at being Hokage." AM smiled and looked at his sunglasses a bit confused. "What's with the sunglasses? They look cool, but why do you wear them so much? You even wore them before you left for your training trip." Naruto looked around, but Tucci had just walked in and had greeted Naruto as well, and then asked the exact same question as AM, and after checking the area was empty, he took off his sunglasses. AM and Tucci were shocked by his eyes, but then thought that they looked very cool. Naruto told them everything that happened from the time at the vote to the present, and they told him what happened while he was away, and he was annoyed that Sasuke was still an arrogant prick. When they were done, Naruto sat down and said, "Give me the Naruto special." And Tucci smiled. He certainly knew how to cheer up a tense situation, and Tucci nodded and said, "One Naruto special coming right up." They started cooking and within a few minutes placed an extra large bowl of mixed flavors of ramen, and Naruto started eating with his usual gusto. Smiled knowing that Naruto would stop by often. She enjoyed his company ever since they first met 8 years before. Within 10 minutes Naruto finished the giant bowl of ramen and sighed as he felt content and said, "Man, I missed your cooking. I've eaten lots of ramen around the elemental nations, but I swear, no matter where I go, this is the best ramen ever." Gucci smiled and giggled and hugged Naruto again saying, "It's good to see you again Naruto, I'm glad you're back." Tucci walked up and laughed, "I feel the same way Naruto, it's good to see you again." Naruto had his foxy grin, and he left after paying for his meal, even though Tucci and said that since it was his return meal that it was on the house. When Naruto left, Tucci looked at and smiled softly as he thought to himself, she really cares for him, who knows, maybe he might return her feelings one day. Felt her father watching her and looked. She was confused when she saw his gentle smile and she mentally shrugged, figuring it was for Naruto. 2 days later, Naruto was asleep in his new home, Naruto had told all of the Rookie 9 and Team 9 about his heritage, but not of his Jujutsu, with Mikoto resting in the other room when suddenly there was banging on the front door. Naruto fell out of bed in shock and walked to the living room. However, due to his room being on the other side of the mansion that was his father's clan house, he heard the door being forced open, and he grumbled to himself in annoyance and heard the person searching for him. He heard a shout of, "Naruto," and knew right away it was Sakura. Suddenly the noise stopped and he came across Sakura standing in the doorway to Mikoto's room, and she was looking at Mikoto and suddenly connected the dots as to who she was, and she heard Naruto behind her and turned on him shouting, "Why is Sasuke's mom in your home? She sounds like she has been beaten up and is just recovering, what did you do to her?" Naruto looked behind Sakura at Mikoto, who was waking up much to his surprise. Nothing and no one can sleep through a session of Sakura shouts lol XD. Naruto pushed past Sakura and ran to Mikoto's side and gently grabbed her hand as he gently spoke to her, Mikoto, are you alright?" Mikoto slowly opened her eyes, and when she saw Naruto she blushed a bit but nodded and spoke weakly, "Where am I?" Naruto sighed in relief, "You're in the Namikaze compound. I was asked to take care of you along with my mom." Mikoto looked closely and asked, "Who are you?" Naruto smiled and gently let her hand go. "My name is Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze." Mikoto looked surprised and asked, "Kushina's son?" Naruto nodded and Mikoto fell asleep again after sighing and saying, "It's nice to finally meet you. I had heard about you and wanted to meet you for a long time. I wanted to tell you that I admire your strength." Naruto smiled and blushed a bit before remembering Sakura and walked up to her. "Sakura, tell me what you needed and get out, and don't tell anyone about this. It's an S-rank secret." Sakura breathed, and Naruto knew that what was coming wouldn't be good. First, Sasuke wants you to meet him tomorrow in the Chunin Exams Coliseum, and second, why can't I tell? This is Sasuke's mother after all. Naruto glared at her and held his hand out at her and whispered, "Banshu Tenin." Sakura flew at Naruto and he grabbed her throat, scaring her near to death. "Listen Haruno, this was classified in S-rank secret by Tsunade herself, it's to protect her from Itachi. Now leave." Naruto dropped her and she got up coughing and ran away, fear plainly seen in her eyes. End of chapter 9. Chapter 10. Sorry for the late post, the net has been glitch for me due to a messed up modem, and also I was a bit stumped as to how to introduce this new character. Disclaimers. I don't own the anime manga Naruto in any way, shape, or form. Naruto walked to Mikoto, who had fallen asleep again, and flared his chakra to get the attention of the Anbu, Nico, that Tsunade had assigned to watch over him and Mikoto. Nico sunshined into the room and spoke in a monotone voice, "What is it Naruto-san?" Naruto looked at the Anbu and sighed, "Okay, first, just call me Naruto, I hate formalities." "Yes Naruto-san." The Anbu was secretly amused that she could mess with him like this, especially since he knew her identity but didn't realize it. Yugao Yuzuki had always helped Naruto both as Anbu operative Nico and as herself off-duty as Yugao Yuzuki. She saw him as a little brother since she knew that he only held the Kyuubi, he wasn't the beast within. Naruto stood up sighing, and she smirked beneath her Nico mask as Naruto continued, "Second, Mikoto woke up a few moments ago when that Haruno girl was here screeching." Nico asked as Naruto nodded in confirmation. "So you want me to inform Lady Hokage, am I correct?" Naruto nodded again, and Nico nodded and sunshined out of the house. Naruto then kneeled by Mikoto's bed as she rested and began to think of what Sakura told him. So Sasuke wanted to fight. Well, Naruto would give him a fight he would always remember, even if he didn't want to remember it. Naruto narrowed his eyes, waited. A few minutes later Tsunade, Shizune, and a group of trusted medic nin came and started to work on healing her, while Naruto stood nearby and watched with a worried expression. Tsunade saw the worried expression on his face and saw that Shizune noticed too and wanted to let him know that Makoto would be alright, so Tsunade spoke up, "Okay Shizune, I'll take over here, you take a little break." Shizune looked at Tsunade, who nodded in the direction of Naruto, and then Shizune understood and smiled gratefully and went over to Naruto. Naruto smiled when Shizune walked over and then looked back at Makoto as Shizune said, "Don't worry Naruto, besides a good meal, she just needs some muscular therapy and rehabilitation, and she will be back to her usual self." Shizune looked at Naruto and smiled as Naruto smiled as well and said, "Thanks Shizune." Shizune smiled even brighter. "It's my job to try to make sure everyone's happy." Naruto nodded, the smile on his face his true smile that he saved for people close to him. Shizune saw the smile and saw it was one of his rare true smiles she had heard about from Kushina, Darien, and Lexi, and she knew that he had opened up to her completely since he usually had a flamboyant personality to cover his true calm persona that he developed on the 3-year trip. She smiled even brighter and placed a hand on his shoulder as Naruto looked up at her with the same smile, causing her to blush a bit, and she walked over to see if the medic nin needed her help. A few hours later, Naruto watched as they had hundreds of acupuncture needles in Makoto's body to stimulate muscle growth, and when those were removed a few minutes later, they began feeding her some various types of soups and medicines, so her body could be able to take in the vitamins and protein her body needed for healing. They told Naruto to keep watch on her and to make sure to feed her only the soup they gave her until they say she was ready for real food again. Naruto nodded and sat down beside the medic nin who was giving Makoto the soup since her muscles needed rest and couldn't get the soup herself. Makoto smiled at Naruto, and Naruto smiled back, causing her to blush a bit as the medic nin fed her again. The next day, Naruto woke up and while eating his breakfast, remembered his fight with Sasuke and groaned, he really needed to take care of Makoto. Naruto sighed, knowing that if he didn't come, Sasuke would come to him. Naruto made a blood clone and ordered it to watch over Makoto, feeding her when needed and helping her with anything she needed. The clone saluted him and said Roger. Naruto's sweat dropped as he didn't know why all of his clones said that when ordered to do something, especially since alright. Or understood. Or something like that would sound way better than Roger. The clone walked to the cabinet where the soup was stored and began to cook it. Naruto considered it a blessing that and Tucci had taught him how to cook, especially now since he had to cook for himself and Makoto. The real Naruto left the clone to its duties and got dressed. When he was dressed he started stretching and walked out the door and headed for the Chunin exam stadium. At the Chunin exam stadium, Sasuke had arrived a few minutes ago and he was waiting for Naruto to show up. After a few minutes of waiting, he smirked to himself, the loser must have realized that he is no match for an elite like me and chickened out, too bad for him that I will fight him to prove I'm stronger than he is. His thoughts were interrupted by Naruto arriving in the stadium with a katana at his waist. "Sorry I'm late, I stopped by the store to pick up a katana, since I don't have one." Naruto chuckled while rubbing the back of his head in embarrassment, making Sasuke get annoyed. "Come on loser, get serious, I called you here to fight." Naruto dropped his hand and had an emotionless expression, and he took a stance as Sasuke did the same, and Naruto rolled his eyes behind his sunglasses. "Just a heads up Sasuke, you want me to fight seriously, so I won't hold back. If you want to survive, you'd best not hold back either." Sasuke sneered at the blonde across from him. "Please, I don't need to go all out to beat you, I'll beat you easily just to show you the difference in our power and how I'm superior to you in every way." Naruto sighed and shook his head. "It's your own life you foolish bastard." They stood facing each other and a leaf drifted between them and drifted slowly towards the ground. As soon as it landed they charged at each other and entered a Taijutsu fight. Naruto was matched blow for blow by Sasuke and the same with Sasuke. Sasuke jumped back and did a few hand signs before shouting, "Fire style. Fireball jutsu." Sasuke breathed out and released a large fireball that traveled towards Naruto who jumped over it and clapped his hands together and shouted, "Earth style. Earth spear." Naruto's skin turned dark brown and he cocked back his fist and threw a punch aided by gravity at Sasuke. Before the attack could hit, Sasuke dodged and Naruto's fist crashed into the ground, causing a huge crater to appear. Sasuke was surprised by Naruto's strength and he activated his Sharingan, which Naruto noticed, and he decided to mess with Sasuke by using techniques that he couldn't copy. So he bit his thumb, drawing blood and went through several hand signs before slamming his hand onto the ground shouting, "Summoning jutsu." A large explosion of smoke appeared, surrounding Naruto and suddenly a large fox the size of a horse with gray fur and a white on its stomach appeared. What caught Sasuke's eyes though was that this fox had 3 tails and it had a mask with a kanji for wind in the center of the forehead of the mask. The fox summoned turned looked at Naruto and bowed, "Greetings Naruto-sama, what is it you need?" Naruto smiled, "Hey Kakis, I just needed your wind chakra for a collaboration jutsu." The fox nodded and sat down and channeled its chakra to its mouth as Naruto made hand signs and pressed one hand on the fox's back. He channeled chakra into it and mixed some water chakra into the fox. The fox released a burst of icy wind at Sasuke. Sasuke tried copying the technique, but when he realized he couldn't he cursed and dodged. However, he wasn't able to completely dodge as the burst got his left foot and covered it in a thin sheet of ice. He quickly broke off the ice when he had gotten clear of the jutsu, and Naruto went through another set of hand signs. Before he finished they heard someone shout, "What's going on here?" Naruto turned around while Sasuke looked up and they saw several shinobi along with Jiraiya, Kushina, Tsunade, Shizune, Darien, and Lexi, and Naruto's sensei, as well as the senseis for teams 8, 9, and 10. They were looking confused as they wondered what the two shinobi were doing, then Sasuke shouted, "Fire style. Grand Fireball Jutsu." Naruto did some different hand signs as everyone looked shocked and said, "Water style." Water encampment wall. Suddenly water rose from a nearby puddle from when it rained the previous night and made a barrier between him and the fireball at the last second. Ironically, the fireball was keeping him out of Sasuke's view, so he couldn't copy the jutsu. The fireball hit the water wall and was extinguished, but caused lots of steam to surround him. Everyone gasped except Sasuke, who smirked and stood up. "This proves that I'm superior to you, loser." The steam cleared and everyone saw Naruto standing there with a bored expression. "Come on, surely you can do better than that. That was the weakest version of my water encampment wall jutsu." Everyone but Tsunade, Jiraiya, Shizune, Kushina, Darien, and Lexi was surprised that he managed to stop the famous technique of the Uchiha clan with what he said was a weak water jutsu. Sasuke was surprised and pissed off as he ran through hand signs, but Naruto made a half-ram sign and said, "Release." Level 4. Naruto then cracked his knuckles and disappeared, shocking everyone, even Kushina, as she recognized the level of speed and couldn't believe he had surpassed the 7th level of resistance and was working on passing the 8th level of resistance. Naruto appeared behind Sasuke and several clones appeared beside him, too fast for Sasuke to copy, much to his annoyance. 3 of the 5 clones then slid below Sasuke's guard and kicked him up, saying then the real Naruto with the other 2 clones came down in a triple dropkick into Sasuke's stomach, all of them shouting, "Naruto Uzumaki barrage." Sasuke felt enormous pain all over as he flew towards the ground. However, before he hit the ground, Naruto dropped down and caught him. Sasuke looked at Naruto thinking he was humiliating him, but suddenly, Naruto dropped Sasuke and put his foot on Sasuke's chest, firmly enough to keep him down, but not so hard as to give him trouble breathing. Naruto looked at Sasuke and said, "I win." Sasuke seethed and growled at Naruto. He tried getting up, but he was pushed down again and again. Tsunade came up and Keikis, who was sitting there watching the scene with interest dispelled. Shizune looked and wondered when Naruto got the fox summoning contract. Tsunade looked at Sasuke and Naruto and nodded for Naruto to let go of Sasuke. Naruto nodded and picked his foot up. Sasuke darted out and, landing beside Tsunade, attempted to attack Naruto again, but Tsunade grabbed him by the wrist and narrowed her eyes at him. He looked back and glared at her, causing her to tighten her grip, nearly breaking his wrist as she was annoyed by that glare. Sasuke winced at the pain, which added to all the other pain he was feeling from Naruto beating him. Sasuke was very pissed because of this. Even though he had trained every single day, the loser was still stronger than him, an elite, and a Uchiha. As these thoughts ran through Sasuke's head, Naruto was watching Tsunade as she turned back to him. "What's going on here, Naruto?" Naruto shrugged. "Sakura came by 3 days ago, saying Sasuke wanted to spar today." Tsunade looked at Sasuke, who looked away. "What?" "It's true, I wanted to spar with a loser." Naruto rolled his eyes behind his sunglasses and shook his head thinking, how pathetic can he get? Tsunade was thinking the exact same thing as Naruto, and she sighed. "Let go of Sasuke's arm. Next time you two want to spar, try to hold back some more." Naruto looked at her, "But I was holding back." Sasuke looked at Naruto, then at the crater he made, in shock. He was holding back. Naruto rolled up his sleeves, showing the resistance seals Kushina put on him the previous year. It had the kanji for 4 in its center, showing its level, but that changed to the kanji for 8, and Kushina spoke up in surprise, "Level 8 resistance? I thought you were still on level 5. Naruto looked at her and rubbed the back of his head, smiling embarrassed. "No, I passed it a little while back. I'm trying to master level 8 now." Kushina smiled. "I think you'll surpass your father. He only mastered 9 levels, but maybe you can master all 10. Naruto smiled as Sasuke looked at the resistance seals. He noticed his Sharingan couldn't copy it and figured it wasn't an ninjutsu but a fuinjutsu, a sealing technique, which was the most difficult branch of jutsu to master since it required perfect handwriting and precision, even greater than the Sharingan can provide. Sasuke was surprised that Naruto even knew about fuinjutsu, let alone was mastering one of the many seals. Sasuke was beyond angry now, the loser kept surpassing him at everything. Ninjutsu, taijutsu, even having a taijutsu so rare it wasn't even documented, and now fuinjutsu. Damn it. The only thing that loser can't do is use Shinjutsu, but wait, my Sharingan can. So I'll get him with the ultimate Shinjutsu, Tsukiyomi. But I need someone to kill in order to get it, but who? I don't have any need for friends, so how do I get the last level of Sharingan? How do I get the Mangekyo Sharingan? How do I get it, damn it, I just can't figure it out. Naruto looked at Sasuke and saw that he was thinking hard about something, but what he was thinking about, Naruto didn't know. Tsunade let Sasuke go and he stood there thinking and fuming at his loss to the blonde. Naruto sighed and looked at Tsunade. Anyways, I'm sure what the bastard here wanted was to beat me to prove that he is the superior shinobi to everyone here. Kushina narrowed her eyes at Sasuke, and he met her gaze with a glare just as fierce, but then Kushina's glare turned so cold that Sasuke flinched and looked away with a HMPH. Kushina sweat dropped on her mind and shook her head. Tsunade sighed and looked at Sasuke with some annoyance, and then imagined the hell she would go through when the civilian council heard about this fight with Sasuke losing. She imagined that if the situation was different that Naruto attacked their beloved Uchiha for no reason, but since it was Sasuke who had challenged him, they had no right to say that Naruto attacked him unprovoked. Tsunade imagined that they still would raise hell, but she smirked knowing they couldn't prosecute Naruto or anything like that. Naruto noticed her smirk and knew she had a way to avoid him getting chewed out by the civilian council, or as Naruto called them secretly, the idiot council. He had been told by Jiraiya that the civilian council had tried to have him arrested, executed, banished, and who knows what else. Naruto sighed when no one was paying attention and looked at the other shinobi and back at Tsunade. So, when did everyone notice our little sparring match? Tsunade pointed at the crater Naruto made and Naruto's sweat dropped. I really had to ask. It should have been so damn obvious. Naruto chuckled and rubbed the back of his head embarrassed. Oh yay, then everyone's sweat dropped and Tsunade flicked Naruto on top of his head, making him crash into the ground and said, what an idiot. Kushina giggled at that and nodded in agreement. Yay, he can be sometimes. A few days later, Naruto was walking out of the village with Kakashi, Sakura, and their new member, Sai, an emotionless and possibly gay boy who freaked the hell out of Naruto, especially with his weird smile. Of course that didn't stop Naruto from being pissed off at Sakura due to what happened yesterday. Flashback no jutsu. Naruto walked up and saw Sakura talking to Sasuke. Naruto figured it wasn't anything unusual, so he started to walk away until he heard Sakura mention his name and froze. He turned around and saw her expression. It wasn't the usual lusting for Sasuke expression, but rather a dead serious expression, and he suddenly had a grave feeling in his stomach. He hid close by and watched carefully. He couldn't hear very clearly, but he read Sakura's lips just fine. He was pissed now. She was about to break Tsunade's orders and tell Sasuke that Mikoto was still alive. Naruto shunshined out and landed a few feet away and grabbed her arm and twisted it behind her back, making her shout in pain. What do you think you are doing, Haruno? Sakura was shocked to find Naruto right there and instantly had a look of fear in her eyes as Sasuke wondered what the hell was going on. Sakura looked at Sasuke and tried to mouth out the secret when Naruto turned her around and took off his sunglasses, giving her a glare so cold that Kurenai's coldest glare would be considered warm. Sakura, you know that is an S-rank secret, you weren't even supposed to know it. Sasuke was very confused and was wondering what he was talking about and decided to make his presence known. What S-rank secret? Tell me, you loser. Naruto looked at Sasuke, this coming from the guy whose ass was kicked by this loser. Sasuke seethed and walked up to Naruto. Tell me now. Naruto ignored him and turned back to Sakura. If you so much as try to tell someone that secret, I'll report you to the Hokage and she'll have you arrested for treason, and even your stupid mother on the civilian council won't be able to save your pathetic ass. Sakura's eyes widened at the thought of being arrested for treason. It was a capital offense usually ending with a sentence resulting in death. Then she was furious for calling her pathetic and her mother stupid. Naruto dropped her and walked off. Flashback no jutsu. Kai. Naruto and the squad were running through a forest when they heard a low rumble. They looked in the direction and Naruto jumped to investigate, Sakura and Sai following not so closely behind, while Kakashi stayed behind. He saw a woman with bright orange hair being surrounded by several Iwa shinobi in a clearing in the forest, but these shinobi had slashes through their headbands, marking them as road ninja. The leader of the group, it was obvious he was the leader because he was the tallest and had on an Iwa Jonin jacket, smiled and advanced on the woman, and she backed up only to notice they were behind her as well, and she shouted out, help. Suddenly 13 Naruto clones dropped down and stood in various stances around the woman who gasped at his sudden appearance. The Iwa ninja's eyes went wide as they took in his features, but what really caught their eyes was his blonde spiky hair. The leader growled, it can't be, the yellow flash of Konoha. The real Naruto lifted an eyebrow, the yondaime. He's dead, you idiots, though I always wondered why I look like him, but who cares, why are you attacking this woman? The leader ignored him and ran at one of the Narutos, and then the rest of the Iwa shinobi followed him. A few minutes into the fighting, one of the Iwa shinobi broke Naruto's sunglasses, which pissed Naruto off, and he basically killed that one with a kunai through the heart, and he pulled out a new set of sunglasses while the others were charging at him, and he put them on and got right back into the fight. A few minutes after the fighting started, Naruto stood with none of his clones left and the Iwa shinobi either dead or unconscious. Naruto turned to the woman and saw that she was actually his age, maybe a year older than him. Naruto held out his hand to help her up since she had fallen over while Naruto was protecting her and she blushed but accepted it. She had a few bruises on her arms and on her left cheek. Her gray shirt was torn a bit revealing her toned stomach, her black pants were worn and faded a bit. However, what really caught Naruto's eyes were her eyes, they were a beautiful chocolate brown in color, and he noticed she was blushing a bit and he realized he was staring and looked down blushing as well, but said, "Are you alright?" The girl nodded and Naruto noticed her hair, its color was orange, but it was covered in dirt and looked like it hadn't been washed in a while. Her hair came down to her shoulders and one bang of hair went between her eyes and made her slightly pale skin stand out a bit more. That's who this is and get a cookie pea. She took in his appearance and she blushed and looked away and nodded, "Why yes, I'm just fine, thank you for saving me." Naruto smiled and she blushed more but smiled thinking, why does he make me feel so at ease? He is very cute. Wait, why did I think that? It must be because he is so cool. He fought those Iwa shinobi and beat them with only shadow clones, which was really cool. I wonder if I can stay with him a bit longer. Naruto saw her thinking nervously and he put a hand on her shoulder as Sakura and Sai dropped into the clearing and smiled, "Do you live nearby?" She looked down sadly and shook her head and Naruto shook her a bit and grinned his foxy grin at her making her blush even more. "Well then, come with us, you can live in Konoha if you want." The girl smiled and hugged Naruto, making Sakura and Sai, who were looking at the bodies of the rogue Iwa ninjas in surprise, look confused. The woman let go and said, "Thank you so much, I have been traveling so much because some rogue ninja, not those but other rogue ninja, destroyed my home village and killed half the people there, the rest, along with me, managed to escape." Naruto nodded and made a blood clone and told her to go with it to Konoha and she looked at him and asked, "What's your name?" Naruto smiled and said, "I'm Naruto Uzumaki, what's your name?" The girl blushed and smiled at him, "My name is Chikyu, and it's nice to meet you Naruto." She walked up to the real Naruto and gave him a quick kiss on the cheek, blushing, before leaving with the blood clone. Meanwhile, Sakura was bug-eyed at the fact that the girl, Chikyu, kissed Naruto's cheek and Sai was just being Sai. Naruto blushed and touched his cheek where she kissed him and then he shook his head, clearing it and turned back to the team, "Okay, let's go back." He stepped on the shards of his broken sunglasses and walked off to meet with Kakashi. He explained what happened, leaving out the kiss of course, and Kakashi nodded and they headed out again to complete their mission. Naruto however, was planning on making a little side trip on the way back. The night before he had a dream and the Rakuto Sennin had visited him and told him to perform a certain task to become an outer path and form the 6 paths. Naruto thought about what he must do and decided to have the Rakuto Sennin himself as his diva path. The rest he would think about, but little did he know that he would become a force to be reckoned with. Naruto knew he would be strong, but he didn't know how strong, and that was what excited him the most. He could bring despair to his enemies and make them surrender. Naruto inwardly smirked and continued on with his team. End of ch. 10. Chapter 11. Congrats to Lucifer's remnants, Shinigami, and SMITH 456 for guessing who Chikyu is. Gives them a cookie. Lol, I'm feeling random p. In the anime manga of Naruto Shippuden, she is Pain's second Chikyu Shoudu, her animal, path. But she will be human in this though she will get some piercings, just not in the face. BTW, sorry for the long wait, I got the worst nightmare to ever happen to author's writer's block. Insert random scream and or shout of terror here. Disclaimers: I don't own the anime manga Naruto in any way, shape or form. On the way back to Konoha after completing the mission, Naruto looked around and saw no one paying much attention and he walked into the woods the group had stopped in to rest. In the woods Naruto created a shadow clone and had it go back while he traveled to the clearing where he found the tomb of the Rakuto Sennin. When he got to the clearing he saw that Jiraiya's jutsu was perfectly preserved, meaning no one disturbed the grave. In fact, some grass had grown over the earth that plugged up the entrance. Naruto formed the snake hand sign and his skin turned dark brown, showing he had activated the earth style. Earth spear jutsu. Naruto looked at the spot where he found the entrance and slammed his fist onto the exact spot he had collapsed into years before. The strength of the jutsu easily broke the earth barrier and shattered it. Naruto jumped down and walked to the tomb and opened it. He looked at the tomb and smirked, time to begin. Meanwhile back with the clone, Kakashi knew right away that it was a clone that Naruto sent back and was surprised that neither Sakura nor Sai knew it. Kakashi heard Naruto muttering plans to himself the day before and knew based on what he could make out, it seemed that he wanted to separate himself from the group. What for, Kakashi didn't know, but he knew Naruto would be safe and decided to let him do as he wanted. Sakura had punched Sai, sending him flying through the wall of the hotel they were staying at. Kakashi had unfortunately had to pay for the damages. However, he would happily take the pair out of Sakura's and Sai's pay for the mission as compensation for having to pay for the damages from his own wallet. Anyways, after a few hours of travel, Kakashi sensed the real Naruto catching up to them nearby and ordered the team to take a 5-minute break. During this time, the Naruto clone walked into the forest, claiming it wanted to look around for a bit, and when it was out of sight, Naruto landed in front of it smirking, "Mission accomplished, thanks for being a decoy for me." The clone smiled and nodded, "No problem," but honestly listening to the freaky guy and the banshee argue was so damn annoying. Naruto nodded and put his hand on the clone's shoulder. "Yay, it is a major pain in the ass being around them, but luckily for you your job's done." "Lucky clone." Naruto muttered the last part softly enough that the clone didn't hear him. The clone dispelled and Naruto came out of the forest looking around at the spot they stopped at, and Kakashi looked at him. "So, did you see anything interesting?" Naruto heard a light tone in his voice, and he realized Kakashi probably knew about him leaving a clone in his place as he went to the tomb, but he calmed himself down and shook his head. "No, not really Kakashi-sensei." Kakashi shrugged. "Well, maybe next time you stop around here, you'll see something interesting." Sai and Sakura watched them, and Sakura felt like she was missing something and thought, "What's going on with those two? They're acting a bit weird." "Okay, never mind, that's normal." Sai probably wasn't thinking anything since he was just drawing with his creepy smile. Kakashi called the group's attention. "We're almost back in Konoha, and we did a great job on the mission, so let's celebrate after we get paid." Sakura looked annoyed. "You mean after you and Naruto get paid? You are taking our pay?" Naruto laughed, and Kakashi nodded with an eye smile. Back in Konoha, Naruto and Kakashi walked ahead of a severely annoyed Sakura and Sai, who really didn't care about not being paid. Suddenly they heard, "Naruto-kun." And they turned and saw Chikyu run up and hug Naruto, with Darien and Lexi walking up soon after with smirks on their faces, and Kushina walk up as Chikyu kissed Naruto for a second and let go of him and stepped back smiling. Kakashi was stunned, so stunned he almost dropped his Icha book, an. For those of you who don't know, if Kakashi drops his precious little orange book, then he is so shocked he's about to pass out. Lol XD. Sakura was shocked that the girl had kissed Naruto yet again and wondered what made him so special. Naruto was blushing, and when he saw Darien and Lexi he had a nervous smile and said, "Hey Darien, Lexi. About what just happened?" was as Chikyu put her finger on Naruto's lips and giggled while blushing and leaned to his ear. "Well, Kakashi sent chakra to his ears to sharpen his hearing. It's okay Naru-kun. They said they were willing to share with me and a few others as well." Chikyu blushed, and so did Kushina, since she was one of the two who Chikyu talked about, but the rest of the comment confused her, and she wondered who else her son managed to charm, not knowing that Darien and Lexi knew about Mikoto falling for Naruto, since when Sakura left they arrived and spied on Naruto and Mikoto. No one noticed Kushina's blush since everyone was focused on Naruto, whose blush was even deeper than, and Kakashi was just barely holding on to his precious little orange book from what he overheard. Chikyu, Darien, Lexi, and Kushina walked away, and Sakura followed them because she wanted to find out why the first three mentioned all seemed so attached to Naruto. Sai vanished via Shunshin and Kakashi walked up to Naruto, putting his orange book in his pocket and putting his right hand on Naruto's shoulder, with a single tear of pride in his eye, which he wiped away with his free hand. "I'm so proud of you Naruto. You're living every man's dream." Naruto looked at Kakashi and vanished via Shunshin as well, and Kakashi began giggling perversely and left via leaf Shunshin. But the girls at a random restaurant. Sakura sat beside Kushina as Darien sat at the end of the table, while Darien and Lexi sat opposite of Kushina and her. She took a deep breath before asking what she wanted to know the whole time. "Why do you three like him so much?" Darien, Lexi, and Chikyu stopped and looked at her confused, and Sakura sighed. "I'm asking why you three like Naruto so much." The girls thought for a moment and all three said at the exact same time, "He saved us, and he didn't ask for anything as a reward." Sakura looked confused and tilted her head. "Is that it? He saved you? Who cares if he saved you, he isn't cool. It was probably just a fluke that he saved you." Sakura was too dense to notice the Kai targeting her from everyone else at the table, which made a few people ask to be moved farther away because they found the air in that area uncomfortable for some reason they couldn't figure out, while the shinobi and Kunoichi in the restaurant all noticed the Kai, and while most immediately paid and left, some stayed to watch with some amusement, not including some random Akimichi clan members, since they wanted to finish their meals. Sakura continued her rant, unaware of the danger she just put herself in. "I mean, yay he saved you, but I bet the guys he fought were either pathetically weak or he caught them off guard. However, if it was Sasuke, he would have beaten them in a heartbeat because he is so cool and so strong." Darien and Lexi reached over and grabbed Sakura's shirt collar and showed her their Kumo headbands with slashes through them, and Darien then pulled Sakura close. "Listen here Pinky, Naruto isn't weak. He saved us when we were being chased by Kumo Anbu because some shinobi didn't like our new raikage and they impersonated us to pin the blame on us. He beat them single-handedly and it didn't even take him long. As for your precious Sasuke, from what Naruto told us, he betrayed his own village just to get power. To me, that is a sign of someone who makes those who abandon their comrades seem like they happily saved the world 10 times over for no reward at all by their own choice. Sakura widened her eyes and then narrowed her eyes and said, please, Naruto's the dead last of the academy, there's no way he'd beat Anbu, especially not from Kumo. Why was he there anyways? I'll bet he was telling the Raikage about the village's deaf ugh. Sakura was thrown by Darien and Lexi and Chikyu, and Kushina landed on top of her with Kushina's sword at her throat, and Sakura noticed their enraged faces. The shinobi, even the Akamichi, were wide-eyed at the scene as Kushina narrowed her eyes. Never talk about Naruto like that again, do you understand, Haruno? Sakura looked terrified but said as strongly as she could, but why are you defending him? He's the loser, the dead last of the academy. Kushina rolled her eyes and pressed the tip of the blade gently against Sakura's neck, making the girl shut up since she was about to continue. Listen Haruno, who gives a shit if he barely passed the academy exam? He told me all about the academy, and I figured out what even he couldn't. You see, Naruto has an enormous amount of chakra and had little to no control back then, which is why he couldn't preform a regular clone jutsu, and yet he is able to use an A-rank jutsu, the shadow clone jutsu, which is difficult even for Jonin to master. Sakura was shocked that the jutsu Naruto was famous for was so advanced, but if he can use it, then why doesn't Sasuke just use it? Kushina sighed and looked at Chikyu, who looked ready to tear Sakura apart. Look Sakura, Sasuke can't use it because if he does, it'll probably kill him, since he doesn't have as much chakra as Naruto. Sakura looked angry, you liar, Sasuke is better than Naruto in every way. If Naruto can use that jutsu then so can Sasuke. Kushina got off and Chikyu took her chance and punched Sakura, breaking her nose, as well as making a dent in the hardwood floor of the restaurant from the impact of Sakura's head on it. It was then that Kushina, Darien, Lexi, as well as all of the other shinobi, saw chakra gathered into her fists and Kushina smirked, looks like you have what it takes to be a Kunoichi young one. Chikyu looked confused and then saw the chakra around her fists as it began to fade away and smiled brightly, that means I can be equal to Naruto now. Now I won't have to worry about him so much since I could be by his side, ready to fight with him. Kushina, Darien, and Lexi giggled seeing that she was like a fangirl, but at the same time, like a true Kunoichi. A few weeks later in the Hokage's office, Tsunade was signing papers as usual and looked up sighing. Suddenly Shizune ran into the room carrying a scroll and said, Lady Tsunade, there's terrible news, the Kazekage has been kidnapped by 2 men in black cloaks with red clouds on them. Tsunade stopped and looked shocked, the Akatsuki. Damn it. Send for Naruto, Kakashi, Sasuke, and Sakura right away. Shizune nodded and ran off to get them. A few minutes later Naruto rushed in followed by Sakura, Kakashi, and Sasuke who all walked in casually. What's wrong Lady Hokage? Kakashi was looking at his book as he spoke until Tsunade explained what happened. Naruto was shocked and worried for his friend, who he considered a brother since they went through the same pain in their childhood. Naruto clenched his hands and growled softly, who attacked him, was it the Akatsuki? Tsunade frowned and nodded. Sasuke and Sakura were confused, and the latter asked, Akatsuki? Who or what is that? Tsunade looked at Sakura and back at Naruto raising an eyebrow. Naruto shrugged, showing he didn't care if she told them about Kyuubi or not, and Tsunade sighed and looked at the other two. The Akatsuki are a group of 10s ranked criminals from various nations. They have formed with a single purpose. To capture the 9-tailed beasts. Sakura tilted her head, but there should only be 8 since the Yondaime killed the 9 tails. Naruto sighed, and Tsunade shook her head. Sakura, I know I taught you better than that. Tailed beasts are just masses of chakra that took a physical form and gained a conscious. You can't kill them, but you can seal them away, which is what the Yondaime did with the Kyuubi. He sealed it in a baby, since a baby's chakra coils are still being developed and can handle the enormous amount of chakra that makes up a tailed beast. Sakura nodded, but still looked confused, while Sasuke's eyes widened and he looked at Naruto. Sakura was about to speak, but Tsunade continued, when a child has a tailed beast sealed within them, they become what's known as Jinchuriki, which means power of the human sacrifice. However, despite being the heroes they should be seen as they are often mistreated, abused by the very villagers they are protecting. Tsunade looked at Naruto sadly, as he looked down with a solemn expression. Sasuke noticed this and put the pieces he had gathered together and spoke up, Naruto was that baby, wasn't he? Naruto, Kakashi, Sakura and Tsunade all looked at him in surprise, and Tsunade nodded, and Sakura looked at Naruto with a surprised expression, and he looked annoyed, save your pity for someone else, I don't need it. Sakura narrowed her eyes and thought, no wonder Sasuke's better than him, he really is a demon. Naruto looked at Sakura and narrowed his eyes, as if he knew what she was thinking, Sakura, stop staring at me. I've had enough of you so leave me alone, got it? Sasuke looked surprised, since Naruto used to have a crush on his pink-haired, unwanted fangirl. Sakura was fuming right now, Naruto baka, stop acting so cool, or I'll spill that secret of yours. Sasuke and Kakashi were intrigued, and Naruto and Tsunade's eyes widened at what she was implying. Tsunade looked at Naruto in shock that Sakura knew about Mikoto. Before any questions could be asked, Naruto grabbed Sakura and slammed her against the wall, with his hand around her throat. Listen close Haruno, I told you that if you ever said a word, not even that whore of a mother could save you from being charged with treason. Kakashi and Sasuke overheard this and wondered what he knew that he didn't want anyone finding out, and Sasuke was dying to know what the blonde was keeping from him. Sakura had fear in her eyes, and Naruto let her go as she started turning purple from lack of oxygen. Naruto walked out to go prepare for the mission, and the rest of the team did as well as Tsunade went back to work, sighing at what trouble Sakura caused. At the Namikaze clan home, Naruto walked in and saw Kushina, Darien, Lexi, and Chikyu sitting in the living room. Chikyu was reading a book on chakra control and manipulation. Darien and Lexi were whispering and giggling to each other, and Kushina was reading a novel she bought from the store earlier that day. They all stopped and looked up as Naruto walked in and saw his annoyance. Naruto told them what had happened and afterwards, they all wanted to pound the girl into the ground. Chikyu hugged Naruto and whispered into his ear, when you get back, let's go out for some lunch or maybe dinner. I want to spend some quality time with my handsome Naruto. Naruto blushed, while Kushina, Darien, and Lexi giggled as they knew what Chikyu asked Naruto for, a date. Naruto nodded and left the room, heading to his room, but made a quick stop to see Mikoto, who had recovered enough by now to eat semi-solid foods. Mikoto looked at Naruto and saw his discomfort. When he finished telling her what happened, she hugged him and calmed him down. Please calm down Naruto, she doesn't know anything about you. I just want you to focus on the good things you have and save your friend. I know you will succeed. Mikoto gave him a bright smile, and Naruto returned it, and Mikoto blushed. She leaned forward to his ear and whispered, to be honest, I've always admired your strength even before Itachi placed me in that coma. Mikoto told Naruto that Itachi was assigned to kill the members of the Uchiha clan, who were planning a coup against the Leaf Village, in order to take control. However, since Mikoto and Sasuke weren't a part of the conspiracy, he thought he would be able to spare them, but the ones who assigned him the mission wanted everyone but Sasuke killed so that they would have at least one Uchiha left and continue to have the Sharingan in the village, but Itachi couldn't bring himself to kill Mikoto, so he casted Jinjutsu on her, placing her in a coma, and on everyone else as well so they would think Sasuke was the only survivor. Naruto hugged Mikoto, comforting her since she was sad because of Itachi's misfortune, and she hugged him back, feeling warm in his arms, and she looked at Naruto out of the corner of her eyes and smiled thinking to herself, he is so gentle and yet can be so strong. He has the merits of an Uchiha while having a heart of gold rather than a heart that lusts for fame, money, and power. Mikoto pulled back and kissed Naruto on his cheek and laid back down to rest some more, leaving a blushing Naruto. Naruto stood up and went to go pack for his mission. A few minutes later Naruto was packed and he saw the door leading to the basement where the body of the Rakuto Sennin was held. He had already perfected the process of becoming an outer path and had turned the Rakuto Sennin's body into an almost complete diva path. He just needed to work on controlling the body, which he would do when he returned. It turns out that the Rakuto Sennin had long white hair that was just as spiky as Naruto's. However, when the process to turn the body into the diva path was finished, the hair on its head had, for some unknown reason, turned as blonde as Naruto's hair, but was in the same style. Naruto decided to get a new outfit for himself and his paths, and chose a black cloak with dark magenta trims, and the inside was dark magenta as well. It looks like the Akatsuki's cloaks, only a dark magenta instead of red and no clouds on it, just plain black on the outside. A few days ago, Naruto had placed a special order for 7 of these cloaks with Tenten's father, Dustin, who ran a weapons shop that was one of the few that actually supported Naruto as he grew up and had received them the day before. Dustin was more than happy to make these cloaks since he saw Naruto for who he really was and not for what was sealed in him. Tenten also was nice to Naruto. Sure, she was annoyed at his kill me orange jumpsuit, but she treated his injuries when she found him after mob attacks when they were kids. Naruto shook his head, clearing it of all thoughts, and ran to the village gates to wait for the team. Naruto arrived at the gates a few minutes early and waited for everyone else. Sasuke walked up and looked at Naruto with curiosity. A little while later, Sakura showed up and glared at Naruto before staring at Sasuke with hearts in her eyes. Kakashi arrived moments later and Naruto unsealed his cloak and put it on, making the rest of the team wonder what that was for and when and where he got it. Naruto ignored them as he put the cloak on, covering his black and burnt orange shirt and his black, which covered his mesh shirtan. This shirt looks like Naruto's Shippuden jacket, comfort-fitting cargo pants with his kunai holsters strapped above the extra pockets. Kakashi shrugged, not really caring where and when Naruto got the cloak, but thought it looked cool on him. Naruto looked at Sakura and Sasuke. What? Do you two have a problem with what I'm wearing? Sasuke simply grunted in annoyance and turned away brooding, while Sakura glared at Naruto and returned to fawning over the Uchiha. Kakashi sighed at Sasuke and Sakura and shrugged at Naruto before waving his hand and saying, "Come on everyone, we've gotta move out, it's a 3-day trip from here to Suna, we should be moving, so we aren't too late." The team nodded at Kakashi and took off, leaping from tree branch to tree branch as fast as they could. Naruto had a focused expression on his face, which was hidden by his sunglasses and the cloak as he thought, "I'm coming Gaara, I'll save you no matter what." Chapter 12. Hey people, I am going to set up a poll because I'm wondering if the Ichibi should be a guy or girl. So go vote and when I post my next chapter 1 will know if Shukaku will be male or female. Disclaimers. I don't own the anime manga Naruto in any way, shape, or form. A few hours after leaving Konoha, Naruto was leaping from tree branch to tree branch a little ways ahead of Kakashi, Sakura, and Sasuke. Sakura was wondering why Naruto was rushing, and so was Sasuke. Kakashi knew it was because Gaara was a Jinchuriki like he was. Sasuke was slowly coming to the same conclusion when he remembered Gaara releasing Shukaku, who was the one-tailed tanuki, raccoon dog, spirit. He shuddered as he remembered how psychotic the demon was, even with its unusual flamboyant personality. It desired to kill everything around it, though it was particularly focused on Naruto and his giant toad summon, who he learned was named Gamabunta. During the 3-year training, Gamabunta learned of Naruto's childhood and his respect for the blonde increased. Naruto narrowed his eyes behind his sunglasses and sped up a bit more as Kakashi caught up with him. "Naruto, calm down, it'll take us 3 days to reach the village hidden in the sand, and even then we know the Kazukiage was taken from the village, but someone might have info on who took them and where." Naruto nodded and slowed down to let Sakura and Sasuke catch up, and Naruto looked ahead as they continued. Along the way Naruto looked out of the corner of his eye and saw Temari, who was the older sister of Gaara, walking along a trail towards the sand village. Naruto motioned Kakashi and he nodded and the team dropped down behind Temari, who turned around and put her hand on the giant fan she carries with her. She recognized Kakashi, Sakura and Sasuke, but she was confused when she noticed Naruto since she didn't recognize him and she took her hand off her fan but looked at Naruto suspiciously, which was noticed by Naruto and Kakashi, and Naruto grinned and waved at her, but she couldn't see the familiar grin because of the high color covering the lower half of his face. She nodded and thought his hair looked familiar and she looked at Kakashi and said, "Hey you guys, what's going on and where's Naruto?" Kakashi motioned Naruto to take off the cloak. Naruto nodded and when he took off the cloak Temari was surprised to find out the mysterious stranger was Naruto. She was impressed with his change, though she sweat dropped at how he still liked the color orange, but was impressed with how it wasn't as bright as his Kill Me Bride orange jumpsuit. Naruto smirked as Temari was wondering why he was wearing sunglasses, but when she asked, she was told it was an S-class secret known only to the Hokage, Jiraiya, and Team 7, minus I of course, who worked with the team in the place of Sasuke occasionally, but only Naruto, Kakashi, Tsunade, and Jiraiya knew the details of the Rinnegan. Naruto however told Kakashi that as long as she swore not to tell anyone, with the exception of Gaara, she could be told, and Kakashi thought for a moment and looked at Temari, who swore she wouldn't tell anyone and Naruto took off his sunglasses, and Temari gasped when she saw his eyes, because even she knew the legend of the Rakuto Sennin, but said nothing since she was wary of eavesdroppers. Sasuke was annoyed because he could tell she knew about Naruto's Jujutsu, but wouldn't say anything. Sasuke knew she was sworn not to speak of it except to Gaara, but that didn't stop from being annoyed. After explaining about how Gaara was attacked, Temari said she would come with them because some sand shinobi still didn't like the Leaf Village shinobi due to the shinobi war and because of the sand sound invasion of Konoha, which was caused by the daimyo of the Land of Wind, giving all the big missions to Konoha rather than its own hidden village, causing the sand village to lose a lot of needed income which led to Orochimaru killing the previous Kazukiage, who was the father of Gaara, Temari, and Kankuro, and had sealed Shukaku into Gaara. The group jumped off and started heading to the sand village again. 3 days later, the Temari guided team through the desert and they arrived in the village hidden in the sand. They heard a voice, "Lady Temari." Kankuro engaged the enemy outside of the village, but he was defeated and poisoned. Kankuro told us he knew who one of the attackers was before he passed out, but before he could tell us he passed out from exhaustion and the poison's effects. Temari and everyone looked surprised that Kankuro was defeated and they rushed to the sand village hospital. On the way they saw that the most of the village was looking anxious and nervous, however a few were talking like nothing had happened. Temari explained why this was, you see, even though most of the village had accepted Gaara, there were still a few who don't like Gaara, in particular are the civilian council. Naruto nodded, as he knew how annoying the civilian council could be. They arrived at the hospital and when they saw Kankuro Sakura ran up and began examining him with Naruto, Sasuke, Kakashi, and Temari behind her. Baki, the 3 Sand siblings Genin sensei, walked in and saw them and welcomed the help. Baki explained that he saw who it was who attacked and described them. One was a blonde man whose hairstyle resembled Ino Yamanaka's hairstyle, only with a ponytail included. He used an earth jutsu which used clay moldings that could be manipulated and made to explode. Baki explained that he couldn't clearly see the second attacker since Kankuro had encountered him outside the village, but he figured from the way he took down Kankuro's puppets with such expertise that it had to be none other than Sasori of the Red Sand. He was a famous puppet master who left the village when he was 16, but that was long ago, so he was put into the bingo book as an S-rank ninja for his mastery of puppetry jutsu and of poisons. Suddenly they heard a gasp and an elderly voice say, "It can't be." Everyone but Sakura turned around and saw an old lady and an old man standing there, the woman staring at Kakashi with rage in her eyes, and she pulled out a kunai, the white fang of the leaf. "You shall die here today." She rushed forward but was intercepted by Naruto who grabbed her arm and pushed her back, and the old man grabbed her sleeve and said, "Sis, calm down and look closely. This person may look like the White Fang, but it isn't him, you heard the rumors. The White Fang died a long time ago." Kakashi laughed embarrassed as he rubbed the back of his head. The White Fang was actually my father." The woman looked surprised but then started laughing, saying she was just pretending to be a fool to fool everyone. This made everyone's sweat drop. Baki walked up to the old woman, "Lady Chio, I'm glad you decided to accept my request to come down and help." Sakura, who had stopped to see what the commotion was about, went back to examining Kankuro and discovered the type of poison used by Sasori. She left to examine the poison further. Baki explained that Kankuro had used the arm of his puppet Crow to get a piece of Sasori's mask. Kakashi nodded and went through some hand signs and slammed his hand on the ground, summoning jutsu. There was a puff of smoke and Kakashi's ninja hound, Pakin, appeared and he raised a paw. "Hey Kakashi, what's going on?" Kakashi took the piece of cloth from Baki and looked at Pakin. "We need you to track the scent on this cloth. Gaara the Kazukiage was attacked and taken, and you can track them." Pakin nodded, and when the cloth was held out he smelled it and nodded, "Alright, I got the scent. Ready to go when you are." Kakashi nodded and Sakura said she was staying behind but had made a few antidotes and gave a few vials of it to Kakashi, and Chio told them she was coming because she had to talk to Sasori since she was his grandmother. The group nodded, not being able to persuade her otherwise, and they left. A few hours later, Naruto, Kakashi, Sasuke, and the old lady, Chio, leapt from tree to tree as they raced behind Pakin, who was following the scent of Sasori. They had long since left the desert and had run across a large expanse of plains and had entered the forest they were now traveling through. They all stopped to take a break and have a quick bite to eat. Naruto, Chio, and Kakashi were discussing how they would save Gaara, and Sasuke was sitting nearby doing one of the few things that he does best, brooding. However, Sasuke looked over and saw something that made his eyes go wide and he stood up and charged at Chidori as he shouted, "Itachi. So you're here, well I guess I'm lucky today, because now you die." Everyone saw and heard this and looked as Sasuke charged forward at Itachi, but Naruto noticed something was off and he saw it. "Sasuke, it's just a Jinjutsu. He's not there, he's somewhere else." Sasuke didn't listen, but when he hit Itachi she went straight through him and was angry to know Naruto was right. Naruto leapt into the air and used his gravity manipulation to hover for a bit as he searched for Itachi. After a minute or two he saw Itachi nearby, getting closer, and he used his Shinra Tensei to propel him towards Itachi and land in front of his, and Itachi stopped. Naruto had his eyes closed and had his sunglasses in his hand, and Itachi believed he was protecting himself from the Sharingan, and he sighed, "Naruto, why would you fight me with your eyes closed? I know you aren't that powerful." Naruto smirked and opened his eyes, making Itachi gasp in shock. Itachi took a step backwards. He knew of those eyes, he had read the ancient tablet hidden under the Uchiha compound which spoke of them, the Rinnegan. How is that possible? Naruto took on a thinking posture and shrugged, "Who knows, who cares, now I'm going to beat you and get some answers I need." Itachi was now confused as to what Naruto wanted to know, but figured it had to do with Gaara and shook his head, replacing his shocked expression with his usual emotionless expression. Suddenly Kakashi, Sasuke, and Chio appeared and saw Naruto fighting Itachi. Naruto flipped and sent a kick which Itachi blocked and Naruto twisted, so his other foot flew at Itachi's face. Itachi simply leaned back and the foot passed his face, but Naruto managed to use this to his advantage. He twisted some more and slipped out of Itachi's grip, and suddenly he heard a sound like several birds chirping. When Naruto realized what he heard, he jumped and Sasuke flew at Itachi and tried to kill him with his Chidori, which failed because Itachi grabbed his arm and tossed him over his shoulder with ease. Naruto saw Sasuke make some hand signs and suddenly breathed out an enormous fireball. Kakashi was about to make some hand signs when Naruto stepped in front, surprising Kakashi. "Naruto, get out of the way." Naruto smirked, "Don't worry Kakashi-sensei, I've got this. I've been dying to try this out since I wasn't any good last year." The fireball was on its way, and Itachi was curious as to what he was doing, as was Kakashi, Chio, and Sasuke, who had his Sharingan activated, and Naruto whispered to himself, "Hungry Ghost Realm." Suddenly Naruto held out his hands in front of him, and when the Grand Fireball Jutsu came near him, everyone was shocked to see the fireball being absorbed into Naruto's hands, without harming him. Itachi was shocked as he thought, so this is the power of the Rinnegan. I wonder what Lord Pain would say if he found out this boy has it. Suddenly the entire fireball was absorbed and Naruto fell to his knees panting with exhaustion. Oh man, that is such a rush. All that power flowing through me before being sealed away, it's amazing. Kakashi ran up to Naruto as he slowly stood up and Itachi charged forward. Naruto whispered, so he still wants to fight. Alright then. Naruto put his hands into the snake hand sign and his skin turned dark brown. Now Itachi, let's get this over with Earth style. Earth Spear Jutsu. Itachi went into a taijutsu fight with Naruto and Kakashi and dodged an attack from behind from Sasuke and he secretly made a shadow clone as he watched the fight, mostly his younger brother and Naruto. Itachi was disappointed in his younger brother since he wanted him to not follow the path he was on right now, the path of revenge and the path of an avenger, which is closely tied with the path of revenge. Naruto was fighting the clone, but Itachi kept noticing that he was holding back a bit, like he wanted to not kill him so he could get the info he wanted, but he could tell that Naruto's mind was in two different positions, one the mission he had to save Gaara, but the other seemed just as personal, but what it was, Itachi couldn't figure out. Suddenly Naruto secretly replaced himself with a clone as well, but only Itachi noticed and Naruto appeared behind him as he spoke. Itachi, you're going to answer a few questions. Right now. Itachi looked at Naruto, who had put his sunglasses back on, and sighed. Very well, what do you want to know? What do you know about Makoto Uchiha being found in the land of waves in a coma? Itachi froze as he turned around fully and stared at Naruto in shock. What did you say? Naruto put the kunai he had drawn when Itachi turned around away and said, near the end of my 3-year training trip, I helped an old woman in the land of waves. My mother, who was with me at the time, went to explore the house and came across Makoto. I want to know why she was there and why no one was told of her being spared. Itachi sat down and a tear fell out of his eye as he spoke in a calm voice that held so much emotion that Naruto could barely believe what he saw. I couldn't kill her, she had nothing to do with what happened, so I just used a genjutsu to make everyone think she was dead, and when I had the chance I took her to the land of waves and put her in a Tsukuyomi-induced coma to protect her. Naruto raised an eyebrow and asked the big question, protect her from who? Itachi looked up at the sky and spoke softly, Danzo Shimura, and his Anbu root. Naruto narrowed his eyes. Danzo, huh? Man, that guy is a pain in the ass. Itachi was surprised by that and chuckled. Yay, he is, isn't he? Suddenly Itachi's clone was dispelled and he looked at Naruto and said in a somewhat pleading voice, please, Naruto, don't tell anyone about mother. If anyone found out, especially the council, she would be nothing more than a breeding machine for them to get more Sharingan users. Naruto smirked and held out his thumb. Don't worry, I've been taking care of her with Granny Tsunade and to be honest, we've grown close, so I'm not gonna betray any one of those who are precious to me. Itachi smiled a small smile and nodded. Thank you, Naruto, now I will tell you a few things. First, Gaara is being held in a cave about 35 kilometers east of here, and I'm not the real Itachi. I'm using the impersonation jutsu, which lets a corpse be used as a clone of me with 1/3 of my power. And my partner Kisame Hoshigaki is fighting a group on their way to help you using the same jutsu. Itachi explained about the barrier surrounding the sealing room and how the seals on 4 of the paper tags were fitted with traps and what the traps were. Naruto nodded as he memorized the info, and then they started fighting as Kakashi and Sasuke came into view, and Kakashi knew Naruto was up to something as he created a clone that threw him up and blinded Itachi since he was in front of the sun. Naruto then focused chakra into his hand and formed a large Rasengan, and as he fell he shouted, Idama Rasengan. The attack hit Itachi and created a huge crater. When Naruto stepped out of the crater, Sasuke grabbed him by the throat and growled at him, what the hell, dope, he was mine to kill. Naruto grabbed Sasuke's wrist and squeezed it, nearly crushing his wrist, making Sasuke let go. Naruto pointed at Itachi and all of them, but Naruto looked shocked, but none were more shocked than Chiyo. Lying in the crater, instead of Itachi, was a Sand Village council member who had recently gone missing. Naruto asked Kakashi if he had sent for backup and Kakashi said yes and that they should already be on their way. Naruto nodded and ran off with the others following, besides Pakken, who Naruto was following. Naruto and the group had arrived at the hidden base, and soon after Guy, Lee, Tenten, and Neji all arrived, and Kakashi explained what the barrier was, but before they left Naruto looked at the tag and said, hey guys, you also might want to be careful of traps. Who knows what these bastards are capable of. Neji looked at Naruto and Naruto smirked at him, and Neji knew that, while Naruto was more serious, he was still the same as before, which made Neji's respect for the blonde increase, but everyone was wondering why he wore those sunglasses that for some reason blocked Neji's Byakugan. Yes, Naruto's sunglasses can block the Byakugan. It's made of a special material that disrupts outward chakra used by Taijutsu, but not inwards, so Naruto can use his Rinnegan, but no one can use eye techniques on him. A few minutes later, Ai's team along with Kakashi stood at their tags and on the signal they ripped them off, but activated the traps which caused clones of them to appear. Meanwhile Naruto, Sasuke, Chiyo, and Kakashi leapt into the room and saw the giant statue which Naruto recognized from the description in the scroll of the Rinnegan. It was the Jito Mizo, the statue of the outer path, but he had read that the statue was alive, maybe it had lost its power, he wasn't sure, but he then saw the 9 ethereal dragons appear out of its gaping mouth and surround Gaara. Naruto jumped towards it and made a few hand signs. His hands began to glow a grey-white glow, and he slammed his hands into the ethereal energy and caused a disruption in the ceiling. Naruto flew through as the energy dispersed and grabbed Gaara. Kakashi jumped up and attacked Madara with Chidori, and after dropped Gaara off with Chiyo, he jumped up and punched a surprised Sasori. Sasori's armor broke, surprising the legendary puppet master, and he shined away from the puppet, noticing Naruto was turning his head as if keeping an eye on him. Madara had substituted himself with a clay clone and was about to make it explode, but Kakashi had used his Rikiri to disarm the would-be explosive. Madara was shocked and he saw Sasori out of his armor, fighting Naruto and Chiyo. Madara ducked as Sasuke charged at him with a Chidori. Chiyo was surprised that Sasori was still so young, but she noticed that he had turned himself into a living human puppet. Naruto was slightly annoyed when Sasori had pulled out a puppet that turned out to be the Sandaime Kazekage and began to make a few hand signs and slammed his hands on the ground, summoning jutsu. End of chapter 12. Disclaimers. I don't own the anime manga Naruto in any way, shape, or form. There was an explosion of smoke as Naruto used the summoning jutsu, and when the smoke cleared there was a large toad with a kind of two-pronged pitchfork club thing with a shield that looked like a sake cup strapped on its back. It had dark red skin with some black on it and a slightly aloof expression. The enormous toad looked around and saw Naruto and nodded towards him. "Greetings Naruto, I must ungracefully ask why you summoned me." Naruto's sweat dropped at Gamaken's attitude. He always said he was ungraceful, which was basically his way of saying he thought he was not a very good fighter, even though he could give Gamashiro a.n. Gamashiro is the white and blue toad with the two katana that Shima summoned with Gamaken, Gamabunta, Fukasaku, and Sage Mode Naruto in the fight against Pain, a run for his money in a fight. "Hey Gamaken, I summoned you because I need you to help me beat that freak right there, along with that human puppet of his." Naruto pointed at Sasori, with the human puppet of the third Kazekage, and Gamaken nodded, "As ungraceful as I am, I will do my best." Gamaken pulled the shield off his back and held it on his left arm, while holding his forked weapon in his right, and Sasori looked surprised at the summon and narrowed his eyes. "This fight will not be easy, that boy must be the Jinchuriki. But I thought Itachi said that he wasn't a very strong fighter." Either Itachi lied or this boy was holding back greatly when they last encountered each other. He did say that Naruto used his comrades distracting him for Naruto to use a technique to get his impersonation clone. Gamaken jumped forward and swung his club, only for it to hit a barrier of black-gray sand, and Gamaken jumped back. "I was most ungraceful to not realize who that human puppet is. It is the Sandaime Kazekage, wielder of the Iron Sand." Naruto was surprised by this and looked at the puppet with interest. "Iron Sand manipulation, huh? So it's an earth-style jutsu." Naruto made a few hand signs and lightning covered his hands. "Gamaken, I'm gonna give you a slight advantage. Put your weapon near me." Gamaken did this, and Naruto touched the weapon's tip and imbued it with lightning chakra. Gamaken had to smile at the brilliant idea of Naruto's and went back to attacking, but instead of being blocked by the sand, Gamaken's weapon went straight through the barrier and nearly hit Sasori and hit Puppet. Gamaken jumped up, landing on the ceiling and pushed off at an incredible speed and slammed his weapon onto the Kazekage puppet, smashing it to pieces. Meanwhile, Kakashi saw the fight as well as Chiyo and Sasuke. Chiyo was beyond surprised at seeing the Sandaime Kazekage as a human puppet and realized that he had started the third great shinobi war. She was upset at this and so was Kakashi, but Sasuke was upset for an entirely different reason. He saw Naruto summon Gamaken and was shocked, but was angered when he saw Naruto use a lightning jutsu that he couldn't copy because he was too far away, and the fact that he had more than one summoning contract, something that shouldn't be possible. Sasuke was seething as he charged past Madara and at Sasori, not wanting to be seen as weaker than Naruto. Sasuke did 3 hand signs and charged a Chidori and thrust a lightning-covered hand at Sasori, only for Sasori to leap out of the way and reach into his Akatsuki cloak and pull out a small scroll that he opened. Suddenly there were 100 poofs, and above Sasori were 100 puppets in red cloaks, each carrying a various weapon. Sasori looked at Chiyo and smirked. "I am sure you have those 10 puppets, the ones you used to take down an entire village, but you should know, with these I took down an entire country. Now behold, red secret technique performance of the 100 puppets." Chiyo then looked at Kakashi and nodded at him, and Kakashi nodded back, knowing she wanted to fight Sasori, and shouted, "Sasuke. Get over here, you and I are gonna fight this guy." Naruto and Chiyo will take on Sasori. Deidara was annoyed and he shouted at Kakashi, "Hey, this guy has a name, you know. It's Deidara." Kakashi looked at Deidara. "I know, I recognized your eye with headband and hairstyle. You were a part of the Hidden Stone Village's demolition corporation." Deidara was surprised he knew so much about him and stuck his hands into the pouches on his hips and saw Sasuke coming towards him. He jumped out of the way and he looked at his hands. Sasuke and Kakashi saw his hands and were surprised. In the palm of both hands was a mouth which spit out clay and smirked. Deidara smirked as well and closed his hands and started molding the clay with a single hand. When he was done he opened his hands and there were 2 clay spiders. He threw them and made a single hand sign which caused them to poof and smoke and reappear as the size of a tiger and them moving towards Sasuke and Kakashi. They dodged out of the way, but the spiders kept chasing them. When they got near, Deidara made a half-ram hand sign and smirked, "Katsu." The spiders suddenly exploded and sent Kakashi and Sasuke flying forward where they crashed into a wall but managed to stand up as Deidara laughed. Naruto and Gamakon were fighting Sasori with Chiyo, who used her white secret technique 10 puppet collection of Chikamatsu. Sasori's puppets were now destroyed and he jumped back and landed beside Deidara, who was talking to a worn-out Kakashi and Sasuke. "You people underestimate my art," Sasori scoffed. "Your work? Art? Don't be ridiculous, that isn't art. Art is the preservation of beauty that lasts for all eternity." Deidara had a tick mark on his head and glared at Sasori. "No, art is the single instant of beauty that lasts for a brief second before vanishing completely. In other words, art is an explosion." The 2 Akatsuki members argued, making everyone sweat drop, but also using the time to recover their strength. Naruto was getting annoyed and made a shadow clone, and the clone ran towards the 2 Akatsuki members as the real Naruto made 2 Rasengan, 1 in each hand. Sasuke was watching Naruto but couldn't copy the jutsu, much to his frustration. Naruto ran forward with the 2 Rasengan and leapt into the air as the clone threw a large smoke bomb, making Deidara and Sasori look around for what was to come. They weren't expecting Naruto to attack them from the front, but when Sasori stabbed him with what looked like a whip with a needle tip covered in poison that came from the torso of his cloak, the Naruto turned out to be a shadow clone. They looked around when they heard Naruto shout, "Rasengan." Naruto dropped and hit Sasori with 2 Rasengan and destroyed his body, but he saw a piece of him, where a heart on a human would be, fly out and land in the hollow part of a heart portion of random puppet, and he stood up. Naruto looked annoyed and Gamakon jumped and landed behind Sasori and swung his club fork weapon and sent Sasori flying, and Naruto smirked as he saw the container fly out of the puppet again and he held out his hand. Banshu 10 in the container, which almost landed in another puppet, flew and landed in Naruto's arms as it struggled to get free, and then Naruto heard a sound. It was a beating sound, almost like a heart, and he looked at the container and his eyes widened as he walked to a puppet that was just a head and torso, no arms, no legs, and most importantly, no weapons. He slid the heart in and held the puppet, making sure it didn't try anything as Sasori took it over. Sasori saw he took over a useless puppet and he tried to get out but saw Naruto was holding him in and he sighed, but his eyes widened as he heard the sound of something being summoned and he turned, but before he knew what happened, Naruto pierced the container with his katana. Sasori looked at the blade and heard Naruto speak loudly so Kakashi, Chiyo, and Sasuke could hear him. "I figured out how you turned yourself into a living puppet. That container holds the only human part of you, the part you don't want but need, your own heart." Everyone was surprised to hear that, and Sasori chuckled, "Very clever koi. So just for beating me, I'll give you this pointless piece of information. I am supposed to meet with a spy in 10 days. This spy relays information to me about Orochimaru. I am supposed to meet him at the Tenchi Bridge at midday. Unfortunately it seems I won't be able to make the rendezvous, which is unfortunate since I hate to keep others waiting just as much as I hate to be kept waiting." Sasori fell silent and Naruto noticed that he was dead and he sighed. He pulled his sword out in Sasori's heart and slid it into the sheath that appeared with his katana. His katana was a simple one with a hurricane-shaped guard and its grip was orange with black, smoothened shark skin underneath. The sheath was a dark orange and had a dragon etched into it. Sasuke was looking at the sword. "With that, I'm sure I could kill Itachi." Before he could say anything he saw in the mouth of the dragon was a swirl much like the ones on the Konoha Jonin jackets and other clothes, and Naruto saw him looking at the swirl and said, "This is the symbol of my clan, the Uzumaki clan, which ruled in the village hidden in the whirlpools which was destroyed years ago." Sasuke smirked. "I guess the Uzumaki were pretty weak." Then Naruto rolled his eyes. "Idiot, if they were weak then why did the hidden mist and hidden cloud villages fear them so much?" Sasuke stopped and looked shocked. "What do you mean, dope? Answer me." Naruto sighed. "It's because they were masters of Fuinjutsu, and they were known for their incredibly long life, enormous chakra levels, and a secret ability that even I don't know much about." Sasuke was shocked that Naruto was from such a clan, but narrowed his eyes. "Well, I doubt they would be able to compete with the Uchiha clan. We're true elites of the shinobi world." Naruto shook his head, sighing once again and walked towards Deidara, who was confused about what was going on and had decided to slip away. He would have gotten away had Naruto not whispered, "Diva Realm," and held out his hand at Deidara and moved his hand like he was swatting a fly, causing Deidara to fly towards the wall, and he pulled some clay out and used it to make a soft clay barrier for him to safely crash into. He landed and started chewing on the clay with the mouths on his hands, which spit out clay birds, and he made them become larger and fly at the Konoha shinobi, and he used them to distract them as he jumped onto the back of one and flew off. They followed him except Gamaken, who was dispelled, and Sasuke and Chio, who were getting Gaara to safety. Kakashi told Naruto of a plan he came up with, and Naruto nodded as he watched Kakashi concentrate. After a minute or two, Kakashi opened his eyes, and his Sharingan had twisted into a new shape, and he strained his eye as he whispered, "Kamui." Suddenly a rift in space appeared and Deidara tried to escape it but lost his arm to the technique as it sucked it up. Deidara's clay bird was injured in Kakashi's technique and crashed in the nearby forest. Naruto jumped out and using his katana, cut Deidara's other arm off. Deidara was then surrounded by Team 9 and Kakashi and Naruto. He ran towards his bird and began ripping pieces off with his teeth and started chewing and swallowing the clay, and Neji activated his Byakugan and saw chakra being compressed in the center of Deidara's body. He knew they would have to run to survive and they ran, except for Naruto and Kakashi as Deidara bloated up and exploded. Kakashi used Kamui again, but some of the blast was escaping, so Naruto used his gravity manipulation to keep the rest of the explosion in the field of Kamui. Naruto and Kakashi fell down, exhausted, and Naruto stood up shaking his head as he helped Kakashi stand up. I ran up with Lee, and they congratulated the two and started shouting on about the flames of youth again, and Guy and Lee hugged each other as everyone turned away before the dreaded sunset over the sea Genjutsu appeared. They managed to separate the two, and they headed back to meet up with Chio, Sasuke, and Gaara. When they caught up, Gaara was regaining consciousness and looked around. What happened? He then saw Naruto and was surprised. "Naruto. What are you doing here and what's with that cloak?" Naruto chuckled. "Don't worry about me, how are you feeling, Gaara?" Gaara suddenly yawned and was surprised by something. "I hear a woman's voice, what is that?" Naruto looked confused and made a few hand signs before touching two fingers to his and Gaara's foreheads and said, "Ninja art. Mindscape linking jutsu." In Gaara's mindscape, Gaara looked around, expecting to see the giant sand spirit in its tailed beast form. Instead he saw a room behind the usual cage doors and saw a silhouette of someone lying in a bed muttering in their sleep. He felt a hand on his shoulder and saw Naruto, and behind Naruto, a similar cage door only with a woman with red hair, fox ears, and 9 tails behind her staring in awe at Naruto. She smiled and waved at Gaara and went back to staring at Naruto, who sighed. "She's kind of a fangirl." Gaara's sweat dropped a bit and Naruto walked up to Gaara's seal and made slight adjustments to it. Suddenly Naruto walked up to Gaara's seal and made slight adjustments to it. Suddenly the figure in the room stirred and woke up. Suddenly they heard Kyuubi shout out, "Hey Shizuka. It's great to see you again." Said woman looked around and walked into view and they were surprised at her appearance. She looked human, with long blue hair that reached her thighs. Her eyes had heavy makeup around them, making them look similar to Gaara's. She had gold eyes, but they weren't as star shapes as before, but just regular slit-shaped pupils. Her skin was tanned a light brown, and she had what looked like dark blue tribal tattoos all over what could be seen of her body. She wore a sandy brown battle kimono with black edges and gold kanji for tanuki on the back that showed off her curves well, but was also very modest. She had a golden sash across her waist and 2 small gourds on her waist. She saw Gaara and she just fell to her knees, sobbing, "Please, please don't be angry at me. Please forgive me, I didn't mean to torment you, I just couldn't control myself. The sealing done by your father drove me to madness, but I never wanted to hurt you, can you ever forgive me?" Shizuka was now crying openly, and Gaara looked at Naruto, who smiled and nodded. Gaara walked up and placed a hand on Shizuka's shoulder and smiled gently at her when she looked up. "If you did not mean to torment me all my life because of my father's idiocy at sealing, then I forgive you." Shizuka looked amazed that he forgave her, and she smiled and closed her eyes. "Thank you, Gaara. I'm so glad I was forgiven." Gaara looked at Naruto, who looked deep in thought and said, "Maybe my disrupting the extraction process knocked some sense back into her." Gaara nodded and Naruto walked up and smiled, glad to see everyone happy, "And I'm sure this means Gaara can sleep now." Shizuka nods and looks up at Naruto and smiles with a few tears in her eyes still. "Thank you for making me stop tormenting him. I'm forever grateful." Shizuka bowed, and Naruto felt embarrassed as he rubbed the back of his head and chuckled. "Don't worry about it, I was happy to help. Now let's get out and back into the real world. You two can still contact each other by telepathic connection." Gaara nodded, and he and Naruto faded from Gaara's seal. Outside Gaara's seal, Gaara and Naruto opened their eyes, and they saw that most of the Sand Village shinobi had arrived, and they looked grateful that Gaara was alive. Gaara looked around and suddenly saw 2 girls start going on about how awesome Gaara is and how happy they were that he was alright. A few people sweat dropped at their fangirl antics, but they agreed on the second part. Ever since they saw Gaara defend the hidden sand from Deidara's C3 bomb, even some of the most stubborn saw that he truly wanted to be accepted and was willing to put his life on the line to protect the village. Though not everyone was convinced, a great number of people were. The two girls rushed up to Gaara and hugged him, much to his surprise. The girls noticed each other and glared for a second before thinking and nodding at each other. Then they resumed hugging Gaara as Temari walked up. "Mitsuri, Mikashi, will you two let Gaara rest?" The two girls looked at Temari with pouts and let him go, making everyone but Sasuke sweat drop again as they walked back to the crowd. Naruto helped Gaara up and everyone left for the hidden sand village. As they ran, Sasuke was confused as to why Naruto was so liked, while most of the shinobi in Konoha, aside from those who are his annoying fangirls, looked down on him. He decided to find out everything about Naruto and learn what makes him so powerful. Several hours later, outside of the village hidden in the sand and leaf shinobi landed outside the entranceway to the sand village and saw almost all of the civilians of the village waiting with Kankuro in front of them, all being supported by Sakura. Gaara walked up and saw his older brother looking rather weak. "Kankuro, are you alright?" The older brother chuckled and waved his hand a bit. "Don't worry about me, are you okay, Gaara?" Gaara smiled and nodded, yes, and the Akatsuki did not get the one-tails. Kankuro looked nervous when Gaara suddenly yawned, and so did the civilians until Naruto spoke up. "You don't need to worry about the one-tail." Due to the seal being absolutely sloppy, her mind was altered and she was sent into a rage. "When I freed Gaara from the sealing, her mind returned to normal, and you people messed up her name. Her name isn't Shukaku, it is Shizuka." Everyone looked confused until Gaara nodded. "He speaks the truth. My father was a horrible at Fuinjutsu, so when Shukaku was sealed, she lost her senses and went into a bloodthirsty rage. Now she has promised me that I can sleep tonight without threat of her overwhelming me." Everyone looked at Gaara and nodded and felt relieved that everything was going to be okay. Then Gaara said something unexpected, "But now I lose my edge of the other cages, since I can't stay up all night finishing my paperwork now. Now it'll be more of a pain than a psychotic Shizuka." Everyone, excluding Sasuke who was still thinking, laughed and sweat dropped. In the seal, Shizuka sweat dropped and pouted. "Don't be mean, I said I was sorry." This made Gaara chuckle inwardly. Naruto walked beside Gaara and Gaara stood in front of the crowd with the shinobi joining the civilians and Naruto smiled. "Glad you're happy here, Gaara. I'll be sure to ask Granny Tsunade if I can come visit sometime." Gaara smiled and nodded as he and Naruto stood for a sec and Gaara held out his hand. Naruto saw this and smirked. He took off his sunglasses, surprising Gaara and Kankuro, who was standing beside Gaara. They looked at Temari, who promised she would explain in private. Naruto took Gaara's hand and some sand rose and formed a woman's hand which placed itself on their hands and Naruto laughed. "Shizuka, I'll see you later too, take care of Gaara, alright?" The sand formed into words that spelled, "Of course, I won't let anyone hurt Gaara nor anyone he considers precious." Naruto smirked as did Gaara and Naruto, along with the leaf shinobi, took off, heading towards their home as Gaara and his people went into their home. Naruto and the group had been traveling for a few hours when suddenly Naruto felt a presence nearby. Said presence suddenly appeared before them in a flash similar to lightning and they heard a voice. "Yo, you're Naruto, right?" Everyone had glares of light in their eyes from the flash the stranger gave off when he arrived and they all squinted to try and see said stranger. The stranger seemed to chuckle in a way that made them realize he was embarrassed. "Oh, sorry about that, I guess I should have held back on charging lightning chakra in my body and had more wind instead. That was my mistake there, sorry." Naruto's eyes weren't as badly affected due to his sunglasses, so his eyes recovered first and saw who was in front of them. End of chapter 13. What if Naruto awakens the Rinnegan at the Valley of the End? Thanks for watching my video till the end. If you enjoy this content, then do consider subscribing to my channel and leave a like if you guys need the next part, comment down, and thanks for watching the video and see you guys in the next video.